Chapter 154. Half a month later, all of Wu Qi's injuries had recovered, but Wu Qi still hadn't figured out how Yan Dan's spell had changed. He had merely tricked Lao Ai, the old demon, and did not make Lu Chengfeng or Princess Yingchuan a favor. After that, he made a fool out of Wei Xiaoxiao by turning the tables on the men she sent to ambush him and capturing some of them alive. Then there was this sudden, storm-like purge. It was a true purge, and the cruelty of it shocked even Wu Qi. When he came back from the mine, Lu Chengfeng, who was overjoyed, told him what happened in the mine during the few days. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head, deeply touched by the cruelty of the imperial clan. Among the 100 sects of Great Yen, 7 of them had their clan leaders beheaded, while several tens of thousands of their clan members were punished. Together with their personal guards, wives, children, and many others, nearly 500,000 people were beheaded, exiled, or imprisoned for life in just one day and one night. Their situation was so miserable that it made all the clan leaders from other sects look at them from the corner of their eyes. All of them were trembling with fear, and cold sweat was streaming down their backs. However, the name of 100 great sects of Great Yen Dynasty still existed. In recent years, Yan Dan had given birth to some more sons, and from them, he selected 7 sons with outstanding talents and abilities to inherit the name of these few sections. Apart from the fact that there were fewer members of the imperial clan, the name of 100 sects of Great Yen Dynasty had not changed at all. Apart from the 7 clan leaders who had their entire families executed, there were tens of thousands of officials who were punished. Qin Qingshui was forced to resign from his position as the chief supervisor of the Central Wind Guard due to dereliction of duty, negligence, incompetence, and other evaluations. Now, he had become an idle man. Hao Ying's family's position of Minister of Justice was also taken away. Among the 3 prime ministers and 9 ministers, except for Gao Jianli, the others were practically replaced. The old influential officials had fallen, and the new influential clans had risen. Great Yen Dynasty had completed a bloody change of power. It was the crown prince, Yan Qijuan, who personally presided over the purge of the 7 clan leaders and all the influential officials. It was said that the 7 clan leaders were coveting the position of crown prince, which had greatly infuriated Yan Qijuan. Therefore, he had raised his butcher's knife and turned Ji City into a river of blood. Among the 8 princes, Yan Xianxian was reprimanded by Yan Dan for 6 hours. His position was not changed, but his title of nobility was reduced. Half of his private army was reduced, and half of his fief was taken back as well. What puzzled Wu Qi was that Yan Dan did not touch Lao Ai in Yan Xianxian's mansion, and he had never heard anything related to Lao Ai. He had no idea how Yan Dan was planning this. Apart from these unfortunate influential officials, a couple dozens of clubs belonging to various vassal kingdoms in Great Yen Dynasty were massacred by the Blood Swallow army. Many common people were involved in the massacre, and their entire families were killed as well. Half of the martial clubs and guilds in the mighty Martial Avenue were related to many influential officials who had committed crimes. The Blood Swallow Army and City Defense Army had besieged many martial clubs in the mighty Martial Avenue, and the battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Several thousand martial clubs of various sizes were wiped out, and half of the mighty Martial Avenue was razed to the ground. Meanwhile, the main force of Great Yen Dynasty, led by Yu and some other military officers, had set out to attack those rebellious vassal kingdoms. This was going to be a war that would last for a long time, as the territory of Great Yen Dynasty was too vast. Even with the help of other vassal kingdoms that were loyal to Great Yen Dynasty, this war would not end in a short period of time. Regarding all the above, the official explanation of Great Yen Dynasty was that Wu Qi, Marquis of Tianyun, had cooperated with the Swallow Army, Scouting Office, and Blood Swallow Army to thoroughly investigate the rebellion in the vassal kingdoms and the assassination of Yen Buji, Duke of Yenlu. Under the careful planning of Wu Qi, he had risked his life and personally arrived at the scene, drawing out the mastermind of the rebellion, Wei Merchant, and slaughtering all the traitors and traitors, bringing peace back to Great Yen Dynasty. That was the official explanation. As for Wu Qi himself, he still had no idea how the Swallow Army, Scouting Office, and Blood Swallow Army investigated the case, and the credit was given to him. His fief had increased from 130 cities in the south of Huaiyang to 300 cities, which was an increase of more than half. But at the same time, the number of his enemies had increased abruptly. At least, from all the vassal kingdoms, the number of people who wanted to kill him was now at least 1 million. Putting on a bitter face, Wu Qi complained to Lu Chengfeng, feeling that he was really innocent. Yan Dan had asked him to cooperate with Jing Ku and Gao Jianli in investigating the case of Yan Boji's assassination. Yet, he hadn't done any investigation yet, and how did such a world-shaking result come out? On top of that, all the credit had been given to him. He felt that he had once again become the bait for Yan Dan, and he had no idea who he was trying to lure out. It was a bad feeling, an extremely bad feeling. Therefore, after making sure that Yan Dan had handed over the spatial breaching spirit gold mine to Lu Chengfeng, Wu Qi hastily urged Lu Chengfeng to set off, getting ready to carry out the plan which they had been preparing for a long time. He wanted Tai clan to break away from the Lu kingdom and form their own power, while Tai clan, the Lu kingdom, and the Lishan kingdom would divide the Gao Ling kingdom among themselves. At the same time, Wu Qi was going to Meng Mountains, looking for a secluded energy vein with verdant hills and clear waters, where he could build an immortal's cave that was as cunning as a rabbit with 3 burrows. While Lu Chengfeng was preparing everything, and also summoned Princess Ying Chuan and the emissary of the Lishan kingdom, Wu Qi brought some men and hurried to Garden of Zhanglu. During the battle at the city gate, Princess Zhanglu was severely wounded, especially when she was struck by the dark skeleton transformed from the fiend, which caused her to suffer a severe injury. After being busy for so many days, Wu Qi had to pay her a visit. However, it seemed that Princess Zhanglu was severely wounded, and had been in a secluded cultivation. Wearing a long face, Bai Zhuer and Bai Zuer had stopped Wu Qi a few times. Left with no other choice, Wu Qi asked Bai Zhuer and Bai Zuer to pay his respects to Princess Zhanglu, and only then did he return to Duke Yan Li's mansion. On the night before he set off, Wu Qi had secretly crafted 3 small minor universal teleportation formation discs, which could carry up to 10 people at most. He placed them at the bottom of the lake in the backyard of Duke Yan Li's mansion, at the sewer outside the mansion, and at a remote residential house in Ji City. The owner of this residential house was a spy from a vassal kingdom who had participated in the rebellion and had been hiding in Ji City, and his entire family was executed. After that, the house was taken over by Great Yan Dynasty and was quickly auctioned off by the government. With no effort, Wu Qi bought the house, then placed a teleportation formation discs in the dry well located in the backyard of the house. After all the preparations were done, early next morning, Wu Qi and his company arrived at the imperial palace of Great Yan Dynasty. Wu Qi, Lu Chengfeng, Luo Kadi, Ma Liang, Meng Xiaobai, Zhang Hu, Hu Wei, and a few other trusted personal guards, together with Princess Ying Chuan and her attendants, and the emissary of Lishan Kingdom who was beaming with joy, came to a barbican located at the southwest of the imperial palace. The so-called barbican was actually a city within a city. It was located at the edge of the imperial city, a square-shaped city that measured about 1,000 feet in both width and length, surrounded by a high wall. The entire wall was made of metal, and countless powerful defensive formations were engraved on it. There were also at least 10 human immortals of Jin Dan Kingdom guarding this place all year round. There were nearly 100 towering watchtowers and watchtowers, as well as several thousand ballistae and MO machines, which had completely sealed off this place. These were just the defensive forces on the surface. Standing at the entrance of the barbican, Wu Qi could sense an extremely powerful energy reaction coming from underneath the barbican. He reckoned there was a self-destruct formation underneath, and it was stacked with a huge amount of fire element energy stones. Once the defensive formation on the perimeter was breached, the formation would be activated. Unless it was in existence with the cultivation base of Heaven Immortal, he or she would be blasted into nothingness. The ground of the barbican was built with a large number of smooth jade slabs, and on top of it was a complicated formation, measuring several hundred feet in diameter. A couple dozens of jade slabs, the size of a water tank, were hovering above the formation. Each of these jade slabs was engraved with complicated lines of formation, and a large amount of energy stones were inlaid on them, glinting with a dazzling light. As Lu Qingfeng was using the teleportation formation of Great Yan Dynasty to travel to the Lu Kingdom under the guise of Zhuguijing Mansion, all the energy stones were paid by the national treasury of Great Yan Dynasty. If not, the cost of teleporting over 1,000 people to the Lu Kingdom would be more than enough to bankrupt the entire Lu Kingdom, or empty all of Lu Qingfeng's current wealth. At this moment, a large number of imperial eunuchs were seen carrying large bags of energy stones on their backs, carefully inserting them into the holes of the formation. There were also a few human immortals of Jindan Kingdom inspecting around the formation, and from time to time, performing incantation gestures to check the stability of the formation. While Wu Qi was watching these imperial eunuchs, Princess Ying Chuan had already come next to Wu Qi, bringing along a fragrant breeze. She gently held his left arm with both of her hands. With an ambiguous blush on her face, Princess Ying Chuan giggled and said, "Martin, you are truly an amazing man. The entire Great Yan Dynasty is in a mess because of you? What is going on here? Too many people have been killed in the past few days. The entire Ji city is filled with the smell of blood." Wu Qi turned his head and looked at Princess Ying Chuan. Suddenly, he laughed and said, "Could it be that princess doesn't know the details?" Princess Ying Chuan gazed at Wu Qi with a hidden bitterness in her eyes, sighed and said, "Ying Chuan is just the daughter of the Lu Kingdom's monarch. In Ji City, what is she worth?" Wu Qi gazed deeply at Ying Chuan, spread his arms, smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, apart from the incident of Shi Martial Club, where I received a report saying that Shi Tianma was related to the assassination of Duke Buji, and that's why I went there to investigate it. As for the rest, Wu Qi really has no idea." Wu Qi is just a spear, used by His Majesty and Gao Jianli to scare people. In fact, Wu Qi has no idea what exactly happened this time. Her eyes flickered, then Princess Ying Chuan continued with a soft voice, "That day, His Majesty suddenly brought a group of people to Wei Merchant. When they met, Wei Merchant immediately activated the formation and besieged His Majesty. Could it be that even Tianyun doesn't know about this? Why did His Majesty go to Wei Merchant? Why?" Wu Qi interrupted Princess Ying Chuan. Without batting an eyelid, he retracted his arm, chuckled and said, "And Ying Chuan, Wu Qi and Lu Suifeng, Marquis Lu, are the best of friends." He took a few steps back and no longer paid any attention to Princess Ying Chuan, who was trying to flirt with him. He could vaguely sense the shadow of Lao AI behind Princess Ying Chuan's back. Perhaps, this scoundrel had realized that something had gone out of his control and was trying to find the answer from Wu Qi? It seemed like Wu Qi's surprise attack on Shi Martial Club had given Lao AI a great shock. However, Wu Qi himself was puzzled. He had no idea what Yan Dan, Gao Jianli, and the others knew, and what they had done. So, what could he say? It seemed like he could only continue to be puzzled. Suddenly, the formation burst into a dazzling glow, and a crystal-clear cry was heard coming from the 12 jade slabs placed in the middle of the formation. A Jin Dan human immortal shouted, "It's done. Everyone, you can teleport now." Chapter 155. The light of the teleportation formation gradually dimmed. The scene in front of Wu Qi and his company changed, and they found themselves in another place. They were surrounded by tall walls, similar to the teleportation formation in the southwest corner of the Imperial Palace of Ji City. However, the defensive strength was at least 100 times weaker. There were only a few dozen cultivators of Xiantian realm patrolling around the teleportation formation. It was a totally different scene compared to the 10 human immortal assistants of Great Yan Imperial Palace, Jin Dan. Wu Qi and his company walked out of the teleportation formation. The formation blinked again, as more people were teleported over one after another. A group of men and women clad in luxurious outfits greeted them. Even though they were still far away from them, they were still shouting, "Welcome to Lu Kingdom, Duke Yan Lu Zhuguijing," and "Welcome to Great Yan Dynasty, Marquis of Tianyun." Countless imperial servants and palace maids were kneeling on the ground from far away, kowtowing and greeting without raising their heads. Only a couple dozens of men and women were led by Tai Yuwu, who was beaming with joy. "Qingfeng." Tai Yuwu tilted her head up and smilingly looked at Lu Qingfeng, who was walking at the front of the group. Lu Qingfeng bowed respectfully to Tai Yuewu and the few men standing beside her. Your son, Lu Qingfeng, offers greeting to my grandfather, my uncles, and my mother. Lu Wenrua, clad in a brocade robe and having a haggard face, squeezed his way out from the crowd. With a dry smile on his face, he greeted Lu Qingfeng. Qingfeng, no matter how much Liang Lu family has wronged you, it is all thanks to our great efforts that you can smoothly take over the position of Duke Yanlu. But your mother has actually written a divorce letter and divorced me. Isn't this a little too much? People from Liang Lu family? Wu Qi gave Lu Wenrua a look, then crooked his finger and beckoned Yen Bugui over. Drag him away and beat him up. Have the scouting office stationed in the Lu Kingdom thoroughly investigate Liang Lu family's misdeeds of violating the law and discipline, oppressing the people, committing all sorts of crimes, and feeding off the people. Yen Bugui coughed lightly and casually gave a signal with his eyes. A group of scouting officers swarmed forward like wolves and tigers, dragging the panic-stricken Lu Wenrua and the people of the Lu family away. Not long after, the sound of wooden boards hitting one's buttocks could be heard from outside. Each sound was crisp and clear, and it was very pleasing to the ear. Wu Qi sneered, shook his head and said, Our young master's father is the former Duke of Yanlu, Duke Buji. How dare this Mr. impersonate our young master's father without any reason? How reckless! Everyone present accepted Wu Qi's point of view and nodded in agreement. Standing next to Taiyuwu was a white-haired old man with a tall stature and an imposing manner. He even nodded at Wu Qi in a friendly manner. This old man was the Marquis of Yuanyang, Tai Kaishan. He knew that many of Lu Qingfeng's decisions came from Wu Qi, and the plan to establish Tai clan as an independent kingdom was also from Wu Qi's plan. Therefore, he had a very good impression of Wu Qi. Amidst the crowd, there was a middle-aged man with a skinny body, a handsome appearance, and a graceful and elegant appearance. He was clad in a black robe, holding a folding fan made of jade in his hand. After Lu Qingfeng and his mother's family had finished greeting each other, he quickly took a few steps forward, bowed deeply to Lu Qingfeng and Wu Qi and said, Lu Wuyo offers greeting to Duke Yanlu, Duke Qingfeng, and Marquis Tianyun, Marquis Wu Qi. Hastily, Lu Qingfeng took a step forward and helped Lu Wuyo to his feet. He smiled faintly and said, There is no need to be overly courteous, Your Majesty. I believe Your Majesty and my grandfather have already come to a decision regarding the purpose of my visit. This is the emissary of Lishan Kingdom, Gao Sheng, the youngest brother of the king of Lishan Kingdom. Now that the three parties have met, let's seize the time and get everything done. Do not give the Gao Ling Kingdom any time to react. Lu Wuyo, Tai Kaishan, and Gao Xing answered together. An unconcealable excitement could be seen flashing in their eyes. The Gao Ling Kingdom could be considered as a powerful kingdom in the western border region, with a vast territory. Once the Gao Ling Kingdom was divided among three families, each of them would get a lot of benefits. With such a good thing happening, they had to speed up their work, dismembering the Gao Ling Kingdom as soon as possible. Otherwise, the longer the delay, the more problems would arise, and the more the outsiders would interfere. There wasn't even a banquet as usual. Under the leadership of Lu Qingfeng, the three parties met and immediately began to mobilize their forces, launching all kinds of plans to take down the Gao Ling Kingdom. Before this, Wu Qi had analyzed all the aspects that should be paid attention to for Lu Qingfeng. Now, when Lu Qingfeng mobilized all the forces, he really had the demeanor of a great general. As the saying goes, devise a plan in the dark and decide the victory from 1,000 miles away. It was nothing more than this. On the other hand, Wu Qi didn't participate in this operation, which would allow Lu Qingfeng to show off his skills and gain some political credit. Together with Meng Xiaobai and the men of Meng Village, he brought along a huge amount of money, resources, and weapons, forming a long convoy. Under the protection of several thousand elite soldiers of the Lu Kingdom, he headed straight for Little Meng City. Because of the spatial breaching spirit gold, it would be very convenient for them to travel back and forth from G City in the future. Lu Qingfeng was going to build a minor universal teleportation formation in Little Meng City. Therefore, Lao He would be the acting city lord of Little Meng City. Before Lu Qingfeng could find a suitable person to replace Lao He, Lao He would have to stay in Little Meng City for a long period of time, helping Lu Qingfeng to take care of all the affairs in Little Meng City, and even the entire Three Mountains province. Just like the agreement between Lu Qingfeng, Tai Yuewu, and Princess Ying Chuan, the entire Three Mountains province would become Lu Qingfeng's private property, and all the taxes collected from it would go into Lu Qingfeng's personal pocket. After traveling day and night, half a month later, the convoy arrived at Little Meng City without a hitch. Meng Xiaobai and his men, whose cultivation base and knowledge had both skyrocketed, had returned to Meng Village. This had caused a great sensation in Meng Village. The investment of a huge amount of money, resources, and armaments had made all the elders of Meng Village dance with joy, unable to say a single word. According to Wu Qi's plan, Meng Village would be transformed from a village with a weak defense into a fortress with a very powerful combative force. With Meng Fortress as the core, in the future, several dozens of new villages would be built in the depth of Meng Mountains, and more armies would be stationed there. Wu Qi had taken Meng Mountains as his and Lu Qingfeng's private land. No matter it was the energy stones, ores, herbs, skins, and other rare treasures found in the mountains, they would all turn into an endless source of wealth, providing for himself and Lu Qingfeng's cultivation. In this plan, they needed a huge amount of population to supply the future Meng Fortress and the many newly built villages. Lu Qingfeng was devising a strategy to dismember the Gao Ling Kingdom. Once the three powers had annexed the Gao Ling Kingdom, a large number of common people would be forced to migrate to the Three Mountains province, becoming the residents of the Three Mountains province. They would then supply the Meng Fortress and those villages, contributing to the development of Meng Mountains. Wu Qi had made up his mind to bite off a big piece of fat meat from the rich and fertile Meng Mountains. After handing over the important task of building Meng Fortress to the experienced and steady Lao He and a group of elders of Meng Village, Wu Qi casually gave them some instructions, then he entered Meng Mountains alone. He refused to follow them, and instead told them that he was going to Meng Mountains to seek a breakthrough, as he had vaguely found an opportunity to form the Jin Dan. Under Wu Qi's insistence, he finally got rid of all the people and entered Meng Mountains alone. After walking several tens of miles along a small path that led into the mountains from the side of Meng Village, there was no other path in front of him. Everywhere he could see was a primeval forest that towered into the clouds. All sorts of rare and strange birds and beasts were seen flying back and forth, and a very dense and wild aura was blowing at his face. Standing on the treetop of a huge tree that stood nearly 1,000 feet tall, Wu Qi threw his glance into the distance. About 1,000 miles away, he saw a group of mountains hidden amidst the forest. Concentrating his energy in his eyes, he looked into the distance, and he could see some faint clouds gathering in the sky above the mountain range. It should be an unusual phenomenon caused by the natural energies rising from the underground energy veins. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi exercised his movement skill and sprinted toward the mountain range, which was filled with a very dense fragrance and a strange, fishy smell of soil. An immortal's cave was not enough for him. In Wu Qi's opinion, if he wanted to be truly safe, he would need at least 10 immortals' caves within the circumference of 100,000 miles in Meng Mountains. Regardless of whether he would need them in the future or not, it would be better for him or the people around him to prepare some backup plans. The mountain breeze was blowing from the opposite direction. Wu Qi did not ride on his flying sword. Instead, he just exercised his movement skill and glided forward. 10 false cores were constantly absorbing and unleashing innate energies of 5 elements. His body was shrouded in a 5-colored gleam, and he was sprinting toward the mountain range at the speed of a speeding horse. There were no powerful demon beasts in this mountain range, only some wild and ferocious birds and beasts with extremely strong bodies. However, it was fine if these birds and beasts did not come and provoke him, but once they showed any signs of attacking him, the sword of Greedy Wolf would immediately transform into a large sheet of water wave and sweep out, shredding these birds and beasts into powder. A huge amount of blood essence would be absorbed into the sword, gradually nourishing it and improving its quality. After sprinting for over 4 hours, Wu Qi had finally arrived at the foot of the mountain range. It was a small mountain range with a circumference of several hundred miles, and there were nearly 1,000 mountains of different sizes. A strange gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes, as he could clearly see the movement of the natural energies from the underground energy veins underneath the mountain range. He nodded his head satisfyingly, then sprinted straight into a canyon located right in the middle of the mountain range. The canyon was about 100 miles long and about 7 to 8 miles wide. There were lakes and streams in the canyon, forests and grasslands, as well as a stretch of rolling hills. Right underneath the canyon were the 3 spirit caves, which were the largest energy veins in this mountain range. One of them was located under a lake, one was located under a hill, and the last one was poking through the ground, penetrating into a sunken cliff. Putting aside the lake and the hill, Wu Qi came to the cliff, which stood over 2,000 feet tall and was fully covered with ancient pine trees and wisterias. The cliff was entirely greenish-gray in color, and because it was nourished by the underground energy veins all year round, the rocks on the cliff were smooth like jade, glinting brilliantly under the sunlight. Underneath the cliff was a dense black pine forest. Underneath the pine trees were all kinds of ancient herbs, and 2 groups of monkeys lived in the forest, one with golden and the other silver fur. When Wu Qi arrived, the 2 groups of monkeys were confronting each other, fighting over a 10,000-year-old ginseng grass that had already borne fruits. Wu Qi descended from the sky while laughing out loud, then uprooted the ginseng grass and shoved it into his storage ring. Glancing at the 2 groups of monkeys, who were staring at him with their mouths wide open, Wu Qi roared out, "Get lost! This place is mine! You bunch of monkeys!" Frightened by Wu Qi's roar, the 2 groups of monkeys turned around and fled immediately. Wu Qi raised his head proudly, looked at the cliff, and nodded satisfyingly. This was a good place to set up a cave abode. Chapter 156. He took a detour around the bottom of the cliff, determined the direction of the underground energy veins, and buried 12 huge formation discs in the black pine forest, each measuring several tens of feet in circumference. There were 12 formation pillars on each of these formation plates, and all of them were made of wood, water, and wood materials. They were also inlaid with spirit stones of the 3 elements, and the majority of the spirit stones were of the wood and water elements. Wu Qi did not dare to neglect. He hurriedly cast out the silver lotus and blocked it outside the cliff. No matter how much spirit qi gushed out from the cliff, it was all swallowed by the silver lotus in one breath. The silver lotus gradually became 5 distinct colors. 5 halos flowed ceaselessly on the lotus, making this spirit object extraordinarily magnificent and magical, full of a powerful aura. On the stone bed in front of the skeletons, Wu Qi threw down a lower-rank flying sword, a middle-rank magical protective robe. He even took off the magical long boots he was wearing and threw them on the stone bed. These things were not of much use to him, but they were the best to decorate this cave dwelling. Other than a few magical items, he also threw a few inconspicuous lower-rank spirit pills on the bed. He deliberately pulled out most of the corks of the spirit pills. This way it would not take long for the spirit pills to completely evaporate. Even a Daluo Golden Immortal would not be able to figure out what was in the bottle. Looking at the turbulent giant river that was also rolling from the east to the west, Wu Qi stopped the impulse to move forward. After settling everything, Wu Qi carefully took out 2 dark green bodies from his storage ring in the last cave abode named Underhand Mansion. Their bodies were stiff, but showed no signs of decay or deterioration. He arranged the formation discs into 2 concentric circles, with 3 on the inside and 9 on the outside. Then he guided a part of the underground energies and injected them into the discs. Carefully, he performed a few hand incantations and triggered the illusory sky-bewildering formation of 7 emotions and 6 desires carved on the discs. The space around them twisted slightly, and the light in the black pine forest dimmed by an insignificant amount. If Wu Qi hadn't been paying attention to his surroundings, he probably wouldn't have noticed the change in the lighting. Unknowingly, Wu Qi had constructed over 20 secret palaces in the vast Meng Mountains and over 30 backup wilderness teleportation formations. In the process of arranging these cave residences, Wu Qi had also collected countless medicinal herbs and rare minerals in the forest. He had recorded the locations of hundreds of rare mineral veins, their approximate storage, and the quality of their products. These 2 corpses were none other than the corpses of Shi Tianma and his son. That day, Meng Xiaobai and his men pretended to leave the city to bury them, but in the end, they were sent back to Wuqi. During this period of time, Wuqi was in a hurry and had no time to absorb them. But now Wuqi smiled. More than 300 miles away from the Great River, he found a high peak in a mountain range where he could overlook the Great River and opened his last secret residence there. For this secret residence, he had used up all the formation discs and more than 90% of the energy stones he had, using them to construct several hundred interlocking formations. Only Wuqi, who possessed the scroll of stealing, could construct such a formation. If it were any other cultivator, just the conflict of these formations would be enough to blow the entire mountain up into the sky. After he finished constructing the first secret residence, Wuqi had also deployed countless misleading formations and traps nearby. Only then did he leave this nameless valley and go deep into Meng Mountains. Along the way, he kept searching for the places where energy veins gathered, or the barren hills and treacherous rivers. Carefully, he opened up one secret residence after another, which he could use as an escape route. Because of his current cultivation base, in just one short month, he had already gone over 100,000 miles into Meng Mountains. A faint mist began to rise from the ground, and a chilly breeze rose from the ground in the black pine forest, bringing with it the faint moaning, and flirting sounds of young girls, which slowly drifted back and forth in the forest, spreading the mist in all directions. Very soon, the black pine forest was shrouded in a very faint mist. The mist was no different from the morning mist that naturally formed in the natural world. Once the sun appeared, it would shrink back to the ground, and no one could see anything unusual about it. Breathing out a satisfied sigh, Wuqi took out the sword of Greedy Wolf, unleashing a sword beam and hacking at the cliff wall, carving out a total of 3 deep pits, each measuring several tens of feet in circumference. After that, he buried the other 12 formation discs into these pits, then filled them up with rocks and crushed rocks. Finally, he sprayed out a stream of flame and burned all the rocks into one. After that, he performed the incantation gesture and activated the illusory sky bewildering formation in the cliff. Immediately, a very faint mist sprayed out from the cliff wall, merging with the water vapor in the black pine forest. The shadowy figure who inherited Wuqi's scroll of stealing had taught Wuqi all sorts of secret palaces, which were simply unimaginable. The shadowy figure had at least hundreds of thousands of secret palaces in the universe, each of which was located in a variety of unimaginable perilous lands, dangerous lands, and all kinds of unexpected places. Each of these secret palaces had powerful restrictive spells that were 1,000,000 times more powerful than this little cave abode, as well as all kinds of life-saving measures, as well as countless spirit pills, miraculous medicines, and escape tools. Rock after rock was hacked into pieces by the sword beam. Wuqi stored all the rock he mined into his storage ring, then brought them far away from the forest. After that, he exercised a mystic technique and hacked them into pieces, then threw them far away. All the rock had been cleaned thoroughly, leaving no trace behind. In the stone chamber at the back was a stone bed. Wuqi threw a hassock made of coarse grass he bought from Ji City onto the stone bed. On top of the hassock, Wuqi carefully placed the skeleton of a cultivator with the cultivation base of embryonic breath tier. As he had killed a lot of people recently, he had prepared quite a number of these skeletons and kept them in his storage ring. Now was the time to put them to good use. He stood on top of the forest and carefully counted with his fingers. After that, he painstakingly selected several dozens of black pine trees from the surroundings and moved the trees to some other spots in the forest, burying a large number of energy stones and formation discs in coordination with each other. With this, the foundation of the lower-grade illusory sky bewildering formation recorded in the scroll of stealing was finally ready. Although it was a lower-grade illusory formation recorded in the scroll of stealing, and the grade of the formation was only 12 primordial stars, it could attract fiends from outer domains to hide in it. Not only could it confuse one's senses and mind, it could also attack one's soul and nascent divinity. Even a heaven immortal who had cultivated his nascent divinity would suffer a great loss if he was careless in this formation. This time, he rode on his flying sword and traveled nearly 20,000 miles in just one day and one night. Half a month later he had gone nearly 400,000 miles into Meng Mountains, but he still could not see where the border of Meng Mountains was. In front of him was a vast expanse of water vapor. A huge river, 100 times wider than the myriad Red River, and unfathomably long, appeared right in front of Wu Qi's eyes. He opened up a door about the size of an ordinary gate on top of a mountain rock, on which Wu Qi carved 3 ancient characters: dust separation residence. After that he laboriously dug out 2 stone chambers, one at the front and the other at the back. In the front chamber, there was a stone table and a stone chair, on top of which were a few crude clay teapots. Wu Qi also threw a few tea leaves that had been soaked in water into the teapots. After finishing all these, only then did Wu Qi twist his body and drill down, going nearly 10,000 feet deep into the ground. He came almost directly to the top of the spirit cave, where he opened up a huge cave abode about 1,000 feet in both width and length. In this cave abode, he had used his strongest ability to deploy several dozens of formations that he could now control. Among them, there were not only illusory formations, but also various killing formations and trapping formations. After he finished deploying the teleportation formation outside, he used a small illusory formation to seal off the cave. Then, with the help of the teleportation formation, Wu Qi returned to his first secret cave. Here, he left behind a batch of energy stones and life-saving spirit pills, as well as 2 spare storage rings. There were many things in the world that could not be predicted. As long as he made some preparations, he would have a greater chance of survival. When everything was ready, only then did Wu Qi come to the core of the illusory sky-bewildering formation on the cliff. Carefully, he rode on his flying sword and thrust it into the cliff. A sword beam flashed, and a piece of cliff was hacked off by the sword beam. A stream of dense energy burst out from the cliff along with a sizzling sound. There was an earth vein spirit cave in the cliff, and the energy accumulated in the cliff had reached an extremely abnormal level. When the cliff was broken off, the highly concentrated energy immediately burst out from it. The sword of Greedy Wolf transformed into a dark sword beam that looked like a flood dragon and began to slash at the bottom of the cliff. Sticking close to the cliff, it carved out a small ditch that led straight to the lake in the valley. After that, Wu Qi flew up to the top of the cliff, drew a small stream from several tens of miles away from the cliff, and asked it to divert its course to the top of the cliff. Tiny streams of water poured down from the top of the cliff along with the ancient pine and wisteria. Thousands of streams of water as thick as a piece of wood covered the entire cliff, twisting and turning along with the mountain breeze, causing the tiny bit of water vapor to disappear without a trace. Several hundred miles away from the valley, he found a remote cave and buried a formation disk there. As for the other formation disk, he planned to go to another cave abode and set it up. With this, he would have many different escape routes in G City, and in each secret cave abode, there would be a teleportation formation that was connected to the other cave abodes, allowing him to travel to the wilderness outside the cave abode through different teleportation formations. In this way, the secret and safety of Wu Qi's cave abode could be ensured to the greatest extent. After that, Wu Qi spent another half a month, focusing all his attention on traveling in a straight line towards the deeper region of Meng Mountains. With the profound knowledge of formations found in Scroll of Stealing, Wu Qi was confident that even an expert who had formed his nascent divinity realm, if he did not know much about formations, would not be able to break through the restrictive spell in his cave abode within 10 days to half a month. In the center of the cave abode, Wu Qi had placed 3 small-scale teleportation formation discs. One of them was connected to the 3 discs in G City, while the other 2 discs were placed in other places. Shockingly, one of the life-saving secret abodes of the shadowy figure was located inside the core of a huge star. With his current strength, Wu Qi could forget about using such a shocking method. He was just trying his best to leave a few more ways out for himself. After stripping off the clothes of both corporeal bodies, Wu Qi took out a huge amount of herbs. The streams of water poured down from the cliff, flowing through the small ditch and flowing into the lake in the valley. After being cleaned up by Wu Qi with his skillful hands, everything looked as if it was made by the heavens, without any trace of artificial work. After pondering for a while, he found a few honeycombs of poisonous wild bees on the cliff, and hung them on a pine tree at the foot of the cliff. Ordinary mortals, even warriors of Xiantian realm, would avoid these troublesome things when they saw them. As for cultivators, they would never get entangled with these bugs that did not possess any sentience. Therefore, this place was much more hidden. Chapter 157. Slowly scanning through the bodies of Shirtianma and his son with the spirit-searching and secret probing palm incantation, Wuqi shook his head disdainfully. Both father and son had consumed an evil beast body pill to strengthen their physical strength. It was a mystic technique used by the evil cultivators to refine their demon beasts. There were countless evil cultivators under the heaven, and the formula of beast body pill was endless as well. They were extremely bizarre, evil, and unpredictable. Both father and son had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, but their corporeal bodies were ridiculously strong, so strong that even Wuqi was amazed by them. However, the large clumps of dark green air coming out from their translucent bodies told Wuqi that the formula of the beast body pill they had consumed was extremely brilliant, and its medicinal strength was very powerful. However, as the evil cultivation technique cultivated by both father and son was not perfect, they could at most absorb 5% of the medicinal strength, and there was still 95% of the medicinal strength hidden in their bodies. If Wuqi could absorb all of the medicinal strength, his corporeal body would be strengthened to the state of indestructible body described in Scroll of Stealing. It was a magical body that could only be possessed by a cultivator who had attained the culmination of nascent soul realm. Furthermore, all the cultivation techniques cultivated in Scroll of Stealing had a very high requirement on the strength of one's corporeal body. The so-called indestructible body described in Scroll of Stealing was a few times stronger than the fleshly body of an ordinary nascent soul cultivator. If Wuqi could cultivate such a magical body, he would not have to fear anyone below the rank of Jin Dan. Even if an earth immortal of nascent soul realm encountered him and could not defeat his opponent in terms of magical techniques and divine abilities, he would have a higher chance of escaping after suffering a beating. Especially when he possessed a powerful corporeal body, he would be able to use those evil cultivation techniques found in Scroll of Stealing without any scruples, as he would not have to worry about the pressure that would cause his body to collapse. When Wuqi thought of those few Jin Dan pills he found in the mine, he could not help but let out a big grin. After carefully observing the corporeal bodies of Shirtianma and his son, Wuqi breathed out a long sigh and said, "It must have been tough for you to play dead until now with the mystic technique of feigning death and still retain a tiny bit of your energy. It is a pity that Wei Xiaoxiao couldn't save you and wake you up, and your patriarch, Lu Buwei, didn't come to save you as well. So, what a pity. We are enemies." Casually, Wuqi pressed his palm onto the chest of Shirtianma and his son, completely cutting off their life force. As soon as the life force in their bodies disappeared, their bodies suddenly trembled. Having lost control of their life force, the bodies of the father and son could not withstand the enormous power in their bodies, especially the pressure of the huge medicinal power. Their bodies were about to disintegrate into pieces. In the blink of an eye, Wuqi waved his hand and a pool of clear spring water surged up from the ground, firmly wrapping the two of them inside. Then, he threw all kinds of spirit herbs he picked along the way when he opened up the secret palace into the water. The water spun at an incredible speed, and loud popping noises of explosion could be heard ringing out endlessly. Finally, the bodies of the father and son exploded into the tiniest blood mist. The clear spring water within the circumference of several tens of feet had been dyed into a frightening purple-green color, while a pungent smell of grass and wood soared up into the sky. The enormous medicinal power of the beast body core pill stored in their bodies was triggered, spreading out like a biochemical bomb. If an ordinary person were to smell this highly poisonous smell, they would die from bleeding from all 7 apertures, yet Wuqi did not mind it at all. He opened his mouth and sprayed out a ball of flame, fusing it into the water. The temperature of the water rose rapidly, as the over 20,000 odd and bizarre spirit herbs, poisons, and all kinds of strange herbs that Wuqi had added into the water were melted by the heat, injecting their medicinal power into the water. A great amount of medicinal dregs and fragments kept spraying out from the water, together with tiny pieces of minced meat and blood. These were the dregs and fragments of the corporeal bodies of Shi Tianma and his son. Without changing his expression, Wu Qi kept spraying out balls of flame to heat up the water in front of him. He murmured under his breath, "In your next life, don't ever practice this kind of evil magic again. Even if you possess a formidable strength, when your intelligence is completely devoured by the medicinal strength, you will turn into a demon beast in human form, a puppet that can be controlled by someone else. You will turn into a demon beast from the spirit of all living beings, and you should thank me for sending you into the transmigration. At least, you can have a new human body." After slowly purifying the enormous blood essence, energy essence, and the remaining medicinal strength from the bodies of the father and son, Wu Qi exercised a Taoist magic and sent all the medicinal dregs and fragments of blood and flesh out of the cave, sprinkling them far away into the huge river. The pungent smell of herbs could no longer be sensed from the cave, and was replaced by a very strong and fragrant aroma of spirit herbs. Using all kinds of poisonous herbs to fight poison with poison, Wu Qi had completely melted the overbearing and vicious medicinal strength of the beast body core pill. After that, he fused and digested all kinds of spirit herbs that could greatly replenish one's energy, turning the enormous medicinal strength contained in the beast body core pill into a medicine with a mild nature, gradually condensing and purifying it into one. Energies of 5 colors were rushing and rocking in the cave, as a great amount of natural energies were attracted by the innate energies of 5 elements in Wu Qi's body and kept rushing over, quickly merging into the clear water in front of him. Because of the attraction of the innate energies of 5 elements, a thread of innate energy drifting in the vicinity of the lofty mountain was separated from the acquired energies, turning into sparkling and translucent beams of 5 colors and quickly injecting into the water. The aroma in the cave became more and more fragrant, and gradually, it twisted and turned into a faint white mist, taking the shape of a dragon and a tiger, wheeling slowly around Wu Qi. This was the unique sign when a supreme-grade spirit herb was about to take its final form. Wu Qi could not help but let out a joyful laugh and said, "Lu Guwei, do you still have a disciple like this? The more the better, the more the better. How many spirit herbs did you use to concoct those beast body core pills? Now they all belong to me." After letting out a few loud laughs, Wu Qi's fingers moved quickly, unleashing all 1,080 hand incantations of the seal of minor universal star, shifting with all his strength. Bright gleams flickered in the water, as a great amount of natural energies kept being absorbed into the water. Gradually, the water in the circumference of several tens of feet had condensed into a ball of pale purple ointment, emitting a faint fragrance. The translucent ointment looked like it was carved out of crystal. It hovered in front of Wu Qi, emanating an indescribable life force. After carefully identifying the properties of the ointment, Wu Qi once again let out a loud laugh. There was still a certain amount of poison left in the ointment. After all, it was his first time using this mystic technique from Scroll of Stealing. Therefore, he could not completely purify the medicinal strength. However, this little bit of poison did not pose any threat to him. As long as the strength of his fleshly body was strong enough, this little bit of poison was like a few mouthfuls of salt to an ordinary man. It was painful but not a serious problem. The glistening ointment was about 10 feet in circumference. Without saying anything, Wu Qi took off all his clothes, clenched his jaws tightly and jumped into the ointment. It took Wu Qi 1 whole month to concoct this ointment. He had no idea how much true samadhi flame he had spat out. Therefore, the temperature of this ointment was comparable to a piece of red-hot iron. Right when Wu Qi dived into the ointment, a sizzling sound was immediately heard, as if a piece of red-hot iron plate was burning the skin of a wild boar. A large sheet of white smoke was seen rising from Wu Qi's body. His skin was burned to pieces, and countless blisters were popping up on his skin. Wu Qi let out a miserable howl, closed his eyes, and cried out with a stern voice, "Only by going through the bitterness can one become a man above all others. The body-forging divine ability of great and great heavens." Both of his palms formed into a half-opened lotus incantation gesture and changed quickly, bringing up streams of bright light as they quickly pointed at all the important acupoints on his body. Wherever the hand incantation gesture passed through, Wu Qi's body would explode, and numerous thumb-sized holes would be opened up on those important acupoints. Like a flood that had just broken a dam, the boiling hot ointment flowed into Wu Qi's body through these holes, transforming into an endless and violent energy that swept across his entire body. Sitting cross-legged in the ointment, Wu Qi formed a lotus incantation gesture with both palms and quickly patted on his body. His body was trembling violently, and every inch of his skin was flowing like water. Noises of his muscles, meridians, bones, and internal organs kept coming out from his body, and at the same time, noises of his body healing that sounded like a silkworm eating mulberry leaves kept coming out from his body. Wu Qi was howling and howling with pain, but he ignored it and focused on exercising the body-forging divine ability of great and great heavens, a secret technique from Scroll of Stealing. Again and again, his body was shattered, and then regenerated. It was like a steel that had been tempered hundreds of times. Every time his body was shattered and regenerated, Wu Qi's fleshly body would be strengthened by 30%. The innate energy in his body was like a tidal wave, mixing with the enormous medicinal strength that kept flowing into his body. Wherever it went, all the meridians would be shattered, regenerated, expanded, strengthened, and then shattered again, regenerated again, expanded again, and strengthened again. All the organs in his body were repeating the same process. Wu Qi had completely forgotten the pain. He was crying and yelling, cursing all the holy immortals and Buddhas in the world, using the dirtiest and most vicious slang to greet all the people who had a conflict with him in his memory. If the heaven had a spirit and heard Wu Qi's vicious curses, it would have sent down 999 thunder tribulations to shatter him. The 10 feet wide ointment kept seeping into Wu Qi's body, turning into an enormous amount of energy that could replenish the functions of his corporeal body. As the days went by, Wu Qi's body grew stronger and stronger, and the amount of ointment on his body grew smaller and smaller. When the ointment was reduced to a thin layer that clung tightly to his skin, 3 months had passed, and Wu Qi did not let out any more cries. His hands kept changing incantation gestures, and the ointment quickly merged with his body. The natural energies in the outside world had transformed into a cocoon that looked like a corporeal cocoon, wrapping around his body. At last, along with a faint rumble of thunder, Wu Qi tore open the cocoon formed by the natural energies in the outside world with a punch, and slowly landed on the ground. His skin was sparkling and translucent, as if it was carved out of a beautiful sculpture, and was glinting with a faint luster. His streamlined muscles looked soft and harmonious, bringing with them an aura of nature that faintly harmonized with the heaven and earth. Conveniently, Wu Qi took out an upper-grade magical flying sword and hacked it forcefully onto his body. His skin did not move at all, but the flying sword produced a large amount of sparks, and a large crack was left on the flying sword. The body of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm could not be harmed by magical items, and only magical treasures could harm the body of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Wu Qi took a deep breath, and his body trembled slightly, causing the entire mountain to tremble. The body of a nascent soul? After using the mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing, my body is much stronger than that of an ordinary earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Unless I am hit by a magical treasure controlled by an earth immortal, no one under the realm of nascent soul can harm me. However, being attacked by several hundred Jindan human immortals is a completely different matter. After checking his own condition, Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then took out a Jindan he plundered, opened his mouth and swallowed it. The Jindan exploded in his abdomen, and an enormous core energy rolled and surged into all his meridians. If it were in the past, Wu Qi's meridians would have been ripped to shreds by the enormous core energy contained in a complete Jindan. But now, it was like a small stream flowing into a dried-up riverbed. He did not feel anything, and the core energy just flowed through his meridians and flowed through his entire body. 10 false cores quickly absorbed the enormous core energy. Gradually, the color of the Jindan turned brighter, and the misty core gradually solidified. Gradually, it transformed from the misty state to the state of flowing water. 3 days later, Wu Qi swallowed another Jindan. Just like that, 21 days had passed. Suddenly, Wu Qi opened his eyes, which shone with a dazzling gleam. Chapter 158. It was too harsh. After absorbing a few Jin Dan, Wu Qi used his divine sense to check the condition of his body. He could not help but sigh. Although the scroll of stealing was magical, it was too harsh. Even with so many Jin Dan, it could only solidify the 10 false cores a little bit. By actually absorbing these plundered Jin Dan, Wu Qi realized that the scroll of stealing could only extract the purest thread of core energy from these Jin Dan, which was the thread of innate nectar produced after the Jin Dan merged with the soul and merged it into the false cores. The rest of the energy that made up the Jin Dan was completely abandoned. Based on this calculation, if Wu Qi could attain mastery in all 10 false cores, the density of these 10 innate Jin Dan would be at least 1,000 times greater than that of ordinary cultivators, and the power of the energies that could be unleashed would also be at least 1,000 times greater. This is too harsh. If I cultivate like this, how long will it take for me to cultivate them to mastery? No wonder without the help of external objects, it is basically impossible for me to cultivate scroll of stealing on my own. External objects, a lot of Jin Dan, a lot of energy stones, a lot of spirit herbs, and a lot of natural essence. Only then can I have a great improvement in my cultivation base. Wu Qi sighed with emotion, then transformed all the impure and useless energies in these Jin Dan into acquired energies of 5 elements, which were cultivated using the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements, the foundation technique of heaven-breaking sword sect. These plundered Jin Dan had absorbed all acquired energies, and only after the painstaking cultivation of the Jin Dan as a human immortal, did they condense into a thread of innate nectar in the Jin Dan. These innate nectar were absorbed by Wu Qi's false cores and solidified. As for the remaining 99% of the energies, only a very small amount of pure energies were transformed into innate energies of 5 elements, while the rest were transformed into acquired energies of 5 elements, rushing ceaselessly through the main meridians in his body. Apart from the pure and powerful innate energy contained in the 7 stealing heaven meridians in Wu Qi's arms, he had also obtained a few Jin Dan's enormous energy and innate energy. His cultivation of the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements had reached the limit of the innate realm. Because of his extremely strong fleshly body, the innate energy in his body had been compressed and condensed into a half-liquid and half-solid state, which was a few times denser than mercury. What was even more frightening was that Wu Qi's meridians were now extremely wide, and the capacity of his meridians was enormous, at least 10 times larger than Shi Tianma's. Therefore, the total amount of spiritual qi in his body was shockingly huge. As long as he wanted to, he could condense the heaven-splitting sword elixir at any time according to the mental cultivation method of the 5 elements sword technique of the heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect. However, Wu Qi did not care about the sky-splitting sword core condensed from the 5 elements sword technique. If he could obtain the unity of sword energy script, the greatest mystic technique of heaven-breaking sword sect, he would be able to condense a sword core that contained all 5 elements, and it would be able to resonate with the innate energy of 5 elements in Wu Qi's 7 stealing heaven meridians. This was what Wu Qi really wanted. Therefore, the matter of condensing the sword core could be postponed for a few days, and he would have to wait and see how he could obtain the unity of sword energy script. He rose to his feet and tidied up the messy secret cave, then carefully activated all the restrictive spells and formations in the cave. Only then did he step onto a teleportation formation disk and teleport himself out of the cave. Over 300 miles away, at the bank of the nameless river, in a water cave under a reef, a large sheet of white glowing patterns surged up from the sand. Abruptly, Wu Qi's body came out from the glowing patterns. Holding his breath, he swam along a narrow waterway for over 100 feet, driving away a few river crabs that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, trying to attack him. Then, Wu Qi poked his head out from the raging river, leaped up into the air and landed on the bank. He spat out a few mouthfuls of water, pulled a bold river crab from his lapel, about 1 foot in circumference, and threw it into the river. After that, Wu Qi threw his head back and let out a few loud laughs. His laughter was loud and sonorous, and there was a vague sound of metal clashing coming out from his mouth. It was like the ringing of a great bell, spreading out for dozens of miles. Together with the surging waves of the river in front of him, Wu Qi felt as if he was going to reopen the world. Due to the great improvement of his fleshly body, the functions of Wu Qi's 5 internal organs, including his heart, spleen, liver, kidneys, and lungs, had all been greatly enhanced. Under the stimulation of the qi circulating technique of 5 elements, 5 colored natural energies were bursting out from his 5 internal organs, merging into his meridians and making his laughter sound louder and louder. It even shook the several miles wide river in front of him, causing the waves to surge and rise into the sky. Now that the secret cave was completed, it was more than enough for him to advance or retreat in this world. The tempering of his fleshly body was now comparable to an earth immortal of nascent soul realm, or even a few times stronger than them. It had laid a solid foundation for his future cultivation. Of all the spirit items of 5 elements, the innate energies of 5 elements had been fully replenished. On top of that, he now had the sword of greedy wolf, the silver lotus, the grand white spatial breaching pearl of innate energies, all of which were supreme grade treasures, and a rare soul replacement puppet in his dantian. With that, Wu Qi truly felt that he could travel freely under this vast heaven. Ever since he arrived in this world, a heavy dark cloud that had been pressing down on his heart had gradually vanished. The meridians in Wu Qi's body were now unobstructed, and his spiritual ocean was crystal clear. While he was laughing, he was breathing in the natural energies, faintly harmonizing with the surrounding wind and clouds. His divine sense was gradually harmonizing with the Tao of heaven and earth. That was why he could laugh so joyfully, and it actually brought about a change in the water flow of the river. While he was laughing happily, all of a sudden, Wu Qi heard a deep, muffled sound of wind breaking coming from his back. Hastily, Wu Qi spun and spat out 2 lower-grade flying swords. One of them was wielded with the Azure Water Sword technique, while the other was wielded with the Mountain Crumbling Sword technique. They transformed into a sword beam enshrouded by water ripples, and a sword beam enshrouded by countless thumb-sized, yellow-colored clumps of soil, protecting him. Meanwhile, the sword of greedy wolf was poised in his arm, ready to be unleashed at any moment if something went wrong. Apart from the sword of greedy wolf, the silver lotus was also faintly visible between his brows. After the preliminary refinement by Wu Qi, all 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies were now embedded in the pistil of the silver lotus like lotus seeds, ready to strike at any moment. Even the few defensive magical treasures of lower-grade magical treasures, which he obtained from killing all the Jindan human immortals and Taoists of Xiantian realm under Wei Xiaoxiao's command, had been prepared. At this moment, Wu Qi was like a venomous snake that had coiled up its body, ready to strike a deadly strike at any moment. However, he had instinctively exercised the mystic art of aura concealing found in Scroll of Stealing, hiding his aura without releasing it. With that, he still looked like a small potato of respiration tier of Xiantian realm, inconspicuous. Who could tell that this guy was actually a Tyrannosaurus that disguised as a little rabbit? Riding on a beam of light and approaching Wu Qi from behind, a middle-aged man was seen. He was clad in a strange earthy yellow long robe, his hair disheveled. He was standing on a huge jade slab the size of a door, engraved with countless runes. Vaguely, the surrounding wind and clouds were stirred up, and from time to time, energies of 4 colors, earth, water, fire, and wind, would burst out from the jade slab. The man had a skinny face, and his body was as thin as a bamboo pole. A strong gust of wind was blowing from the surface of the river, rolling up his sleeves and making them flutter in the wind, as if a gust of wind could blow him far away. Stepping on the huge jade slab, which measured 30 feet in length, 3 feet in width, and 1 foot in thickness, the middle-aged man looked down at Wu Qi condescendingly. With a flustered and exasperated expression, he breathed out a heavy breath and said, Are you Wu Qi? Great Yan Dynasty, Marketanyan, Wu Qi? The number 1 lackey of Duke Yan Lu, Yan Qingfeng? Looking at this middle-aged man with a cultivation base of Middle Jindan realm in astonishment, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, Wu Qi, am your master, Maun. But what lackey? It doesn't sound nice. Can you please not use these two words? No matter what, your master is the chief hanger-on of Duke Chengfeng. He is a hanger-on, a brother, not a lackey. Do you understand? Come, call me master and let me have a good time. The middle-aged man had been hurling insults at Wu Qi the moment they met. Therefore, Wu Qi was too lazy to have a proper conversation with him. Instead, he just pestered him with some nonsense words. The middle-aged man let out a hideous laugh, nodded his head and said, "You are Wu Qi, that's it. It's him, that's it." Taking a deep breath, the middle-aged man roared hysterically, "You bastard! Do you know how long we've been searching for you? Can't you just stay quietly in one place and let us find you and kill you? Why are you running all over the mountains and plains?" Wu Qi stared blankly at the man. After a long while, when the man had finished spitting, only then did Wu Qi cry out in shock, "What did you just say?" Taking a deep breath and wiping off the spittle from the corner of his mouth, the man sneered and said, "The 5 of us have been following you all the way from Ji City to Lu Kingdom, from Lu Kingdom to Meng Village, from Meng Village to Meng Mountains, all for the sake of killing you. But you're too lucky. Every time, you were either accompanied by someone, or you were hiding in a crowded place, making it difficult for us to kill you. We waited until you entered Meng Mountains." The man's face twitched a few times, then he stared at Wu Qi with a bitter expression, sighed pitifully and said, "After you entered Meng Mountains, even eldest senior brother's heavenly star positioning disc could not track your exact location. He could only roughly calculate your location. We've been following you for a few months, in this barren mountain and wilderness." He swallowed a mouthful of saliva, then said angrily, "In this barren mountain, we've been eating and sleeping in the open for a few months. We didn't even prepare a change of clothes. No food, no water, no beauties to serve us, no disciples to listen to our orders. We had to do everything by ourselves, and we even had to chase after you. What kind of days have we been living these past few months?" With a wave of his hand, he threw a talisman into the sky. A strong blue beam shot up into the sky, then exploded violently, transforming into countless blue specks of light that spread out and formed a huge talisman that measured tens of miles in circumference. Rumbling noises of explosions rang out as the blue specks of light exploded one after another, forming into a huge talisman in the air that looked like a real entity. In the middle of the talisman were 3 faintly discernible characters: Heavenly Spirit Sect. Among the 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty, Heavenly Spirit Sect was a sect that specialized in the study of talismans and restrictive spells. All offensive and auxiliary talismans of Great Yan Dynasty were produced by Heavenly Spirit Sect, and cultivators from Heavenly Spirit Sect were involved in the construction of defensive formations for all cities and mansions. Heavenly Spirit Sect was the one who was responsible for the production of all the lethal weapons in Great Yan Dynasty, as well as the parts that needed to be engraved with runes and defensive mechanisms. It was a sect that was extremely wealthy and had nearly fused with the official of Great Yan Dynasty. It had a close relationship with many influential figures. Compared to the poor Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, any disciple of Heavenly Spirit Sect was like a wealthy man. "Senior, may I ask if Wu Qi has offended Heavenly Spirit Sect?" Wu Qi stared at the middle-aged man standing on the jade slab with a puzzled expression. Suddenly, a furious roar was heard coming from a distance. "Not only that, he has also greatly offended us, Heavenly Spirit Sect." 4 strong beams shot out from 4 directions. They were 4 jade slabs of different shapes and colors, with a yellow-robed cultivator standing on each of them. 5 Jindan cultivators from Heavenly Spirit Sect who were hunting Wu Qi had gathered here. Among them, the strongest cultivator was actually a cultivator who had attained the mastery stage of Jindan and was on the verge of breaking through the realm of nascent soul. From dozens of miles away, he had unleashed a tremendous pressure that felt like a hurricane pressing towards Wu Qi from afar. Chapter 159. About 100 miles away from the riverside where Wu Qi and his men were hiding, there was a small village surrounded by a few small hills. Blood was everywhere, and dead bodies were scattered all over the village. The buildings in the village were set ablaze by a great fire, and the dead bodies were scorched by the raging flame, emitting a pungent, burnt smell that spread in all directions. Some broken and damaged weapons were scattered messily on the ground. Obviously, they were destroyed by a very strong external force. Nearly 30 elite warriors, clad in black soft leather armors without helmets and carrying long blades in their hands, were roaming slowly in the village. They kept searching for the remaining barbarians from piles of firewood, rice jars, wells, and other hidden places, then chopping them into two. There were also some warriors going in and out of the houses that were not on fire, transporting some energy stones and metal ores they found to the outskirts of the village. On a small piece of flat land at the entrance of the village, several thousand pieces of energy stones and various metal ores that had not been polished yet were piled up. A few dozen burly warriors clad in heavy armors were escorting a burly man, who was clad in a pale blood-red armor and carried a heavy tiger-headed spear. He was counting the treasures one by one. It took the burly man a full 15 minutes to count all the energy stones, and he could not help but scratch his head in annoyance. The number is still not enough. Including the ones we found a few days ago, we have less than 500 upper-grade energy stones. Our mission is 1,000 upper-grade energy stones and 30 supreme-grade energy stones. Let's go and see if there are any barbarian villages nearby. After shoving all the energy stones and metal ores into the storage bag tied around his waist, the burly man grumbled in a low, muffled voice, "If we are the slowest in completing the mission, the 100 strokes of the stick will not feel good, and my buttocks will blossom." Before his voice could fade away, a beam of blue light suddenly shot up into the sky from a distant horizon. Accompanied by a series of explosions that sounded like muffled thunder, a huge rune that measured several tens of miles in circumference hovered in the air for a full 10 minutes, before it gradually turned into tiny fireflies that drifted across the sky. The burly man and all his subordinates raised their heads abruptly, and their pupils shrunk to the size of needle tips. Heavenly Spirit Sect? Does that mean we have bumped into some living people? The burly man licked his lips, casually pointed at a few of his subordinates clad in soft armors, and said, "Go, report the situation here. The rest of you follow me. Let's find out who these stupid fellows are. Hee, aren't they afraid of attracting ghosts by releasing such a large-scale summoning talisman in a place like this?" Military orders must be obeyed. Immediately, a few elite warriors stepped onto a specially made, 3-feet-long, oval-shaped magical item that looked like a skateboard, with 2 wings on both sides. Along with a swishing sound, they flew thousands of feet above the ground and into the distance. The burly man immediately threw out the tiger-head windsplitter spear, which transformed into a bloody streak of light that covered his entire body, and flew towards the direction of the blue light. The other heavy-armored warriors flew up one after another, while the remaining dozens of soft-armored warriors stepped onto the wing-shaped magic artifacts and followed closely behind them. Wu Qi's body kept swaying under the tremendous pressure, like a weed in a stormy sea, as if it would be completely destroyed at any time. Narrowing his eyes, he fixed his gaze on the 4 cultivators who were rushing at him from all directions and cried out in a stern voice, "Are all of you seniors from Heavenly Spirit Sect? Why are you following Wu Qi to this place?" The surrounding void was trembling faintly, while the natural energies of earth, water, fire, and wind were vibrating abnormally. Riding on a strong wind, 4 yellow-robed cultivators came shooting over. In just a blink of an eye, they had formed a small 5 elements formation around Wu Qi. Together with the middle-aged man who came first, they had surrounded Wu Qi in a space that measured 1,000 feet in circumference. The jade slabs underneath their feet emitted a blinding light, attracting the natural energies of 5 elements in the surrounding natural energies, turning them into powerful shackles of 5 elements that locked down the flow of natural energies in this place. Once Jin Dan and below were sealed by this minor 5 elements energy sealing formation, not only would they be unable to absorb any natural energies from the outside world, even the circulation of their innate energies would be greatly slowed down. If an ordinary Xiantian Taoist was trapped in this formation, perhaps they would not be able to use even a tiny bit of innate energy and would be at the mercy of these cultivators. Wu Qi's body trembled. 2 lower-grade flying swords fell to the ground abruptly, and he slumped weakly to the ground. He threw his head back and cried out, "Killing without teaching is torture. Seniors, you can kill Wu Qi, but you must let Wu Qi die knowing the reason behind his death." Who did Wu Qi offend? Who did he offend? Even if I have to die, I want to die in peace. Among the 4 yellow-robed cultivators who came later, the old man with the highest cultivation base, a cultivator who had attained the mastery stage of Jindan, was obviously their leader. The old man, who had a pair of extremely rare double pupils that shone with a green gleam in his eyes, said coldly, "I am Ling Wuju from Heavenly Spirit Sect, the elder of Heavenly Spirit Sect." "Little Wu Qi, do you really not know the reason why you deserve to die?" Wu Qi lay on the ground, his body twitching and looking at Ling Wuju pitifully. He breathed out a long sigh and said, "Junior, I really don't know." Ling Wuju glared at Wu Qi, his body shivering with anger. After a long while, he roared furiously, "If not because you were a busybody and ruined Wei merchant, why would we condescend to hunt down a Xiantian junior like you? Do you know that after Wei merchant was confiscated, Heavenly Spirit Sect's annual income dropped by 70%? Do you know that because 13 of our sect's elders were involved in the case of Wei merchant, they were executed by His Majesty's imperial decree?" Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. Heavenly Spirit Sect had a secret cooperation with Wei merchant, so it was reasonable for them to secretly produce some powerful talismans and provide them to Wei merchant. But this secret income accounted for 70% of Heavenly Spirit Sect's total income? This was a huge enmity. Especially this time, Yandan had actually ordered the execution of 13 sect elders of Heavenly Spirit Sect. That was 13 human immortals of Jindan Sect. No wonder Heavenly Spirit Sect had sent out 5 human immortals of Jindan Sect to hunt him down for a few months. If not because of the various defensive formations and defensive mechanisms that concealed his aura from time to time while Wu Qi was constructing his cave abodes, disrupting the aura around him, these few men would have long found Wu Qi. How many human immortals of Jindan Sect could there be in a sect? Yandan had ordered the execution of 13 human immortals of Heavenly Spirit Sect. This was a blood feud. Since Heavenly Spirit Sect could not do anything to Yandan, they could only vent their anger on Wu Qi. 5 human immortals of Jindan Sect were determined to kill Wu Qi. After all, in the official propaganda of Great Yan Dynasty, it was stated that Wu Qi was the greatest contributor in wiping out Wei merchant, and he was the one who found out all the details. Smiling bitterly, Wu Qi looked at Ling Wuju, sighed and said, "Elder Ling, would you believe me if I told you that I have no idea how His Majesty investigates the case?" Ling Wuju shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. The most important thing is to give an explanation to the entire Heavenly Spirit Sect. If you stayed in G-City, we couldn't do anything to you. But, since you've come here and entered deep into the barren mountain alone, don't blame us for being cruel." He waved his hand, and a 2 feet and 4 inches long light purple talisman appeared in his palm. As he was about to unleash the talisman, Wu Qi suddenly screamed, "Wait! I have one more question. How did you track me down?" "We used a teleportation formation to leave G-City and come to the Lu Kingdom. Even if you have a mystic technique to track us, the distance between us is too far. How could you find me so easily?" After a brief moment of pondering, Ling Wuju nodded his head and said, "I'll let you die knowing the truth. The teleportation formation from G-City to the Lu Kingdom is not only constructed by Great Yan Dynasty. Not long after you arrived at the Lu Kingdom, we arrived as well. As long as the distance between us is no more than 30,000 miles, our sect's most precious treasure, the Heavenly Star Positioning Disc, will be able to determine your position. There is no way you can escape from us." After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi shook his head in shock. Apart from the teleportation formation system constructed by Great Yan Dynasty, there was another teleportation formation in G-City? It could also teleport from G-City to the Lu Kingdom? Who was the one who constructed this teleportation formation? Wei merchant? That was possible but not very likely. Then who could it be? Could it be that Yen Dan had not cleaned up the internal affairs of Great Yen Dynasty? After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi asked timidly, "Who constructed this teleportation formation? If you want to kill me, then let me die knowing the truth." Ling Wuju opened his mouth and was about to answer Wu Qi's question, but suddenly he laughed coldly. He glared at Wu Qi and roared, "Little brat, are you trying to get information from me? Don't even think about it. Do you think I'm someone who can be fooled so easily? Damn it, you can die now." With a shake of his wrist, a large sheet of flame burst out from the light purple talisman in his palm, transforming into a purple-red fire dragon and thrusting towards Wu Qi. Wu Qi recognized the talisman. It was the 39 Celestial Flaming Dragon Talisman, a very powerful talisman among all the offensive talismans sold by Heavenly Spirit Sect. The most powerful talisman was the 39 Celestial Flaming Dragon Talisman, which was equivalent to 80% of the full force strike of an early-stage Jin Dan human immortal. It was a very powerful talisman. In the black market of Four Seas, the price of this talisman had reached an astonishing 100,000 gold coins, and it was a priceless talisman. A high temperature that could melt rocks came blowing at Wu Qi's face, while a long and drawn-out dragon roar shook Wu Qi's ears and made him feel a faint pain. The several tens of feet-long fiery dragon came whistling down from the sky. Suddenly, Wu Qi's body flickered and flew over 1,000 feet away, landing not far behind the middle-aged man from Heavenly Spirit Sect who appeared first. A loud boom rang out, as the fiery dragon blasted out a large pit, 1,000 feet deep and over 100 feet in circumference. All the rocks and sand in the pit had turned into scorching lava. Because of the powerful explosion, the crimson lava splashed up into the sky, turning into countless fireballs the size of bowls and shooting in all directions. The spot where Wu Qi stood was now filled with smoke and fire, dirt and rocks flying in all directions. It was impossible to see where Wu Qi's body was. Ling Wuju also did not see the sudden change just now. "Is he dead?" he asked hesitantly. While hiding behind the middle-aged man, Wu Qi's eyes turned cold. A five-colored gleam shot out from his eyes as he opened his mouth and spat out the sword of Greedy Wolf. It transformed into a 10-feet-long sword beam, enshrouded in tiny wisps of flame, and shot whistling out. The sky-burning sword technique of Heaven-breaking Sword Sect's 5-element sword technique allowed the sword beam to transform into a flame, which allowed the cultivator to use the Samadhi true flame in his body to ignite the natural flame in the outside world and burn everything in the world. When cultivated to the highest realm, the cultivator could truly unleash a frightening power that could incinerate the heaven and earth. The middle-aged man standing on the jade board did not realize that Wu Qi might be able to escape. How could a mere Xiantian cultivator whose innate energy was sealed by the minor energy sealing formation of 5 elements and the flaming dragon talisman still have a chance to escape? Accompanied by a shrill wolf howl, the sword of Greedy Wolf pierced through the middle-aged man's back, spraying out a large amount of burning blood. The severely wounded middle-aged man let out a miserable howl. He turned his head abruptly, glared at Wu Qi with his eyes wide open, and roared, "Senior brothers, be careful. There is something strange about this kid." All the blood essence in his body shot out from his mouth, turning into a blood arrow and falling onto the jade board underneath his feet. Abruptly, a blinding light burst out from the 30-feet-long jade board. Accompanied by a deafening thunderclap, it soared up into the sky like a door plank, pressing down viciously towards Wu Qi's head. Chapter 160. The name of the jade tablet under the middle-aged man's feet was Green Shadow Wind Slaughtering Talisman, a natal talisman treasure crafted by Elder Jin Dan of Heavenly Spirit Sect with a mystic technique. It had consumed a great amount of rare natural materials, and was forged with his own blood essence and soul, becoming the strongest and only magical item owned by Heavenly Spirit Sect's Jin Dan Talisman Master. Among the 5 elements, the Green Shadow Wind Slaughtering Talisman had the element of green wood. It could draw out the most violent wind between the heaven and earth, turning it into countless wind blades that could kill people. For example, when a natal talisman treasure crafted by a talisman master who had cultivated to the realm of gold immortal, It could transform the wind blades into dimensional blades, using them to kill the enemies through the cracks in space. It was a very frightening power, and almost invincible. The only weakness of a talisman treasure was that it needed to be controlled by a talisman master at all times. Only then could it have the power to attack and defend the enemies. Once the talisman master's attention was not on the talisman treasure, it would become an inanimate object, no different than an ordinary stone or wooden stake. That was the reason why the sword pierced through the middle-aged man's body after he let his guard down. The deadly strike from Wu Qi had taken away all the life force in the middle-aged man's body. Scorching flames kept bursting out from his body, and in just a blink of an eye, his body was burned into ashes. A clear cry rang out from the sword of Greedy Wolf, as the Jin Dan in his dantian flew out and was held in Wu Qi's hand. However, the green shadow wind-killing talisman underneath his feet had been activated by all his blood essence. It had transformed into a huge glint of wind, glinting brilliantly with green light. A huge wind dragon, several miles tall and over 100 feet in circumference, was thrust towards Wu Qi with an ear-splitting noise. Caught unawares, Wu Qi was dragged into the wind dragon. He stood firmly on the ground, using his innate earth energy to draw the earth energies under his feet and pour them into his body, making Wu Qi's body heavier than a small hill. He even performed the spell of 3 mountains of earth with his left hand, increasing the gravity by 3 times. No matter how the wind dragon was crazily tearing around him, his body remained motionless amidst the strong wind. Tens of thousands of palm-sized wind blades, which were glistening with a green light, pounced at Wu Qi's face. They circled around Wu Qi's body and slashed at him, ripping his clothes into rags. The wind blades kept hitting Wu Qi's skin, which was as fair as the finest jade. However, even though these wind blades were several dozens of times tougher and sharper than a steel blade tempered 100 times, they could only produce countless sparks on his skin, and failed to leave even the tiniest scratch on his skin. The indestructible body was a few times stronger than the Dharma body of an Earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Unless an Earth immortal of nascent soul realm attacked with a magical treasure, or several hundred human immortals of Jin Dan attacked with magical treasures at the same time, nothing could hurt him. Wu Qi let the countless wind blades hack and slash at him. He just sneered and released a trace of his divine sense. His right hand kept changing the spirit-searching and secret probing hand gesture, carefully probing the secret of the green shadow wind-killing talisman in the eye of the wind. Under Wu Qi's probing, everything about the green shadow wind-kill talisman was completely exposed to him. The materials used, the combination of runes in the talisman, the direction of the formation and the flow of the energy, none of them could keep any secrets from him. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, Wu Qi had learned all the secrets of the green shadow wind-killing talisman, one of the 5 elements talisman treasures of Heavenly Spirit sect. As long as he was given enough materials, he could duplicate the green shadow wind-killing talisman exactly. However, the current Wu Qi did not have to spend a huge amount of precious materials to duplicate a talisman treasure. He opened his mouth and spat out a golden coin, then spat out a mouthful of energy onto the coin. After that, he recited an incantation and casually threw the coin into the air. Abruptly, the coin expanded to the size of a water jar. The eye of the coin flickered and kept shooting out large sheets of bright gleams. The green shadow wind-killing talisman hovering in the center of the wind dragon trembled, and its green glow was shattered into pieces. It transformed into a huge jade board and fell heavily from the sky. This coin, which was taken from Wei Xiaoxiao, had the power to obtain all kinds of flying swords and magical treasures. Wu Qi gave it a try today, and sure enough, it had an incredible effect. He grabbed the huge talisman treasure with one hand and kept injecting innate energies of 5 elements into it. In just a blink of an eye, the blood essence and divine sense that the middle-aged man had injected into the talisman treasure before he died was expelled, and the talisman treasure was now under Wu Qi's control. However, before he started cultivating the mystic technique of Heavenly Spirit sect, although he owned this talisman treasure, Wu Qi could not make full use of it. Therefore, he could only keep it in his storage ring. Even if he could not control and use it, This talisman treasure was still the combination of several tens of thousands of kilograms of precious materials. It was worth it to break it down and retrieve the materials. As the inheritor of Scroll of Stealing, of course, Wu Qi would never give up on a treasure like this. The wind dragon disintegrated abruptly, and his clothes were torn to shreds by the wind blades. A naked Wu Qi appeared before Ling Wuju and the others. Ling Wuju stared at Wu Qi with fear and roared at the top of his voice, "Kid, what did you do to junior brother Howing?" Junior brother Howing? Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. They were from Howing's clan. No wonder they were so excited to chase after him together with Ling Wuju. Not only had he ruined a great deal of business for Heavenly Spirit Sect, Yandan had also offended quite a number of influential clans in Ji City. Howing's clan was one of them, and the other 3 yellow-robed cultivators standing next to Ling Wuju had a ferocious gleam in their eyes. Judging from their looks, they were also members of influential clans. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh. He was too lazy to explain anything to Ling Wuju. Abruptly, he tore apart the air and sped towards them. An ear-splitting noise of wind breaking was heard. With a flip of his palm, Wu Qi threw out a glinting gold ingot, which abruptly transformed into a gold ingot that measured several tens of feet in circumference and smashed down towards Ling Wuju's head. This gold ingot was Wei Xiaoxiao's magical treasure. With its weight of several tens of thousands of kilograms, just by smashing someone with its own weight, it could make a human immortal Jin Dan suffer a great loss. On top of that, Wu Qi had injected a thread of innate gold energy into the gold ingot, allowing it to absorb a huge amount of gold element energies and fuse it into its own body. As a result, the power of this gold ingot was now a few times stronger than when it was in Wei Xiaoxiao's hand. It could exert a force of approximately 500,000 kilograms. Ling Wuju had witnessed the tragic death of his junior brother, and even his talisman treasure was seized by Wu Qi. He had become vigilant. Right after the gold ingot was smashed, he gave a loud cry, and the jade slab underneath his feet suddenly emitted a large sheet of yellow light. One after another, the yellow light connected to the ground, absorbing the powerful earth element energies and kept injecting them into the talisman treasure. The name of this talisman treasure of Ling Wuju was Yellow Element Mountain Suppressing Talisman. It was an earth element talisman treasure, capable of communicating with the earth, driving the mountains, and shifting the energy veins. It was an extremely powerful talisman treasure, especially as a cultivator of Jin Dan who had attained the Mahayana realm. After several hundred years of laborious cultivation, this talisman treasure had been refined several dozens of times by him and had been upgraded several dozens of times. Its power had grown from an upper-tier magical item to a middle-tier magical item. The earth element energies kept injecting into the talisman treasure, forming into a small yellow hill that stood over 100 feet tall and 1,000 feet in circumference above Ling Wuju's head. Layers upon layers of yellow earth element energies kept bursting out from the small hill, transforming into one after another powerful hurricane that greeted the gold ingot that was pressing down from above. Clang! A loud ringing of metal rang out, as the gold ingot was knocked back several thousand feet high. Wu Qi's heart trembled, and his divine sense was shaken. Immediately, a mouthful of blood surged up to his throat. It was true that his body had reached the level of indestructible body, and the magical item controlled by a human immortal like Jin Dan could not cause any harm to his body. However, his divine sense was shaken, and his corporeal body could not effectively protect it. The thread of divine sense contained in the gold ingot was nearly destroyed by the small yellow hill. Wu Qi's divine sense was shaken, and he nearly fell to the ground. The gold ingot returned to his palm with a sad wail. Then, Wu Qi threw out the gold ingot, which he had just rendered a great merit. This time, he exerted all his strength to drive the gold ingot, turning it into a golden coin that measured several tens of feet in circumference. A bright beam of light that stretched several tens of feet long shot out from the eye of the coin, bringing with it a swift and fierce aura as it thrust towards the Yellow Element Mountain Suppressing Talisman. There was a huge difference in power between a talisman treasure that had been activated and one that had not. Just now, when junior brother Howing was killed by Wu Qi, It was because his talisman treasure had not been activated yet. But now, Ling Wuju was using all his strength to drive his talisman treasure. His entire body was shrouded in an extremely dense Earth Empress energy. The bright beam of light emitted from the gold ingot spun 36 times on the talisman treasure, making it shine brightly and produce loud clanging noises. However, it could only make the talisman treasure sway, and no matter how hard it tried, it could not make its energy scatter to the ground. Ling Wuju's face had turned pale with fear. His body swayed on the talisman treasure as he roared furiously, "Are all of you dead men? All of you are shouting that you want to follow me out to kill this little brat? But what are you doing standing there in a daze? Are you going to collect my dead body after I'm dead?" Only then did the other 3 talisman masters of Heavenly Spirit sect react. One after another, they performed incantation gestures and drove the talisman treasures underneath their feet. There was a stream of dark energy, a red light and a white light. The talisman treasures of these 3 talisman masters were indeed of water, fire, and metal element. No wonder they could cooperate with Ling Wuju and junior brother Haoying in deploying the minor 5 stars spirit sealing formation. At this moment, they joined hands with Ling Wuju and deployed another 4 elements grand formation. 4 types of energies merged into one, and a strong 4-colored light enveloped their bodies. Countless cracks appeared on the ground because of the powerful energy ripples. Shielding themselves with talisman treasures, Ling Wuju and the other 3 talisman masters took out a large number of talismans at the same time. One thing that talisman masters of Heavenly Spirit sect did not lack was powerful talismans. With a casual shake of their hands, countless explosive talismans, lava talismans, lightning talismans, falling rock talismans, golden saber talismans, and many other talismans were thrust towards Wu Qi. The golden coin pointed at Wu Qi's finger kept shooting out large sheets of bright light, wheeling and slicing around the 4 talisman treasures at a high speed, constantly removing the energy gathered by the talisman treasures. Paying no attention to the middle and low-grade talismans that filled the sky, he forcibly used his fleshly body to resist the numerous talismans and leaped forward. Fireballs exploded on his body, lava rolled off his skin, thunderbolts exploded on his skin, huge rocks and countless golden sabers shattered on his skin, but none of them could stop him from moving forward. Not even a scratch was left on his body. Indestructible body, the Dharma body of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. After all, he was a human immortal who had attained the Mahayana realm of Jin Dan, and was only 1 step away from the realm of earth immortal. Ling Wuju could easily recognize the mystery of Wu Qi's body. He roared furiously, "Which damned fool told me that he is just a little Taoist master of Xiantian realm? What a bastard! Are you trying to get us killed? Junior brothers, lend me a hand and activate the heavenly star positioning disc with all your strength. Or else, all of us will die here." A green jade disc, measuring 3 feet and 6 inches in circumference and 4 inches and 9 centimeters in thickness, slowly shot out from the top of Ling Wuju's head. It corresponded to the number of stars in the sky, and coincided with the great divination. When the jade disc came out, the surrounding sky darkened instantly. Although it was broad daylight, a few stars actually emerged in the sky. Ling Wuju gave a loud roar and pressed his palm on the jade disc. The other 3 talisman masters exchanged a glance, then stretched out their hands and pressed on Ling Wuju's back at the same time. Their energies fused into one, and kept injecting into the jade disc. Wu Qi gave a long and sonorous cry. His eyes went wide as the silver lotus shot out abruptly, bringing with it countless 5-colored halos that thrust out like a wheel of blades. He opened his mouth, and the acquired fire spirit pearl that was floating in his dantian transformed into a ball of fire with a diameter of about 10 feet. Before the silver lotus flower could reach it, it landed heavily on the array formed by the 4 talisman treasures. Amidst a loud boom, Wu Qi himself was knocked several hundred feet away. Scorching hot flames shot in all directions, and the formation of 4 elements shattered with a loud boom. Chapter 161. The acquired spirit item, the Pearl of Fire Element, was an innate spirit item condensed from the acquired true flame aura. It represented the strongest power that the acquired flame could achieve in this world. As Wu Qi did not have the time to truly refine it, he could only throw it out like a brick and smash it at someone. But that was more than enough. Relying solely on the power of the pearl of fire element, the talisman formation of 4 elements was instantly destroyed by the highly condensed, high-temperature and high-pressure flame. The frightening firepower that could instantly turn several dozens of lofty mountains into wisps of green smoke dispersed in all directions, blasting the 4 talisman treasures far away. The crimson flame transformed into a wall of flame that stood 1,000 feet tall and shot in all directions. Wu Qi was blown away by one of the flame walls, and his short hair was burned into ashes once again. Not only his hair, all his body hair was burned away by the flame, and his body was now naked like a large piece of glass. Ling Wuju and his companions never expected that Wu Qi would have such a spirit item. The scorching heat waves rushed whistling and rushed into their bodies, nearly burning them into ashes. Large amounts of sweat burst out from their bodies, turning into water vapor and evaporating in an instant. The fat under their skin was melted into liquid grease by the high temperature, flowing out from their pores and igniting on the surface of their skin. Their hair and fingernails were scorched and twisted by the high temperature, and their bodies began to soften and collapse like candles. The severe pain from the scorching flame made Ling Wuju and his companions howl miserably. But they did not have any way to fight back. Apart from drawing all kinds of talismans that could be used to kill people, the talisman masters of Heavenly Spirit sect had their strongest weapon, which was also their only magical item, the talisman treasure. The mystic cultivation technique of Celestial Spirit sect was to use the technique of forging talisman treasures to transform one's gold core into a collection of talisman symbols. Only in this way could one communicate with talisman treasures and unleash an extremely powerful lethality. After the Jin Dan was engraved with a large number of runes, it could no longer communicate with other flying swords and magical treasures. Facing the raging flame that was burning their bodies, they could only endure it, persisting in injecting their energies into Ling Wuju's body, allowing him to activate the Heavenly Star Positioning Disc. The Heavenly Star Positioning Disc was an upper-tier magical treasure that was extremely rare in Great Yen Dynasty. Almost all of them could produce their own item spirit, turning them into a spirit item. This magical treasure corresponded to the stars, and it had the powerful effect of surveying mountains, rivers, and veins, as well as peeking into the mysteries of all kinds of formations. Using the secret technique of Heavenly Spirit sect, it could also perform all kinds of divination. For example, one of its functions was to roughly determine the location of Wu Qi within 30,000 miles. It was also one of the few magical treasures that were compatible with the Heavenly Spirit sect's talisman masters and could be driven by them, apart from their own talisman treasures. Just when Ling Wuju and the other 3 were nearly turned into dried corpses by the scorching heat unleashed by the spirit fire pearl, the energies they injected into the pearl finally activated the cornerstone treasure of Heavenly Spirit sect. All of a sudden, several thousand tiny silver specks flickered on the surface of the Heavenly Star Positioning Disc. The stars that appeared in the bright skies suddenly grew brighter. Visible strands of cyan and silver light fell from the sky like mist, quickly injecting into the bodies of Ling Wuju and the others. Abruptly, the surrounding flames were extinguished, and the bone-piercing cold energy of the stars enveloped the space of several miles in circumference. The Heavenly Star Positioning Disc soared up into the sky. Accompanied by a deep, muffled noise of a millstone turning, the Heavenly Star Positioning Disc began to spin slowly. Several dozens of starlights flickered on the surface of the disc, then a silver beam that was as thin as a hair shot out abruptly. Right after landing on the ground, Wu Qi dodged the silver beam, which was aimed at his heart, and brushed past his body. A frightening force, which contained a coldness mixed with a strange high temperature, brushed past Wu Qi's body. A thumb-sized piece of flesh was missing from his left shoulder. The wound was so clean that it could be used as a mirror, without even a single drop of blood. This was the 6-9 Spirit Star's destructive beam, unleashed by the Heavenly Star Positioning Disc. This destructive beam was mixed with the energy of the stars, and combined with the innate magnetic force that came from the ninth heaven that could innately wipe out all life force. It possessed the power to destroy everything. Just now, that thin beam of silver beam was nearly as powerful as a full-force attack launched by an Earth immortal of nascent soul realm, wielding a middle-grade magical treasure, and possessed the power to kill an Earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Fortunately, Wu Qi had a strong fleshly body, and his reaction speed was extremely fast. Once his body landed on the ground, he immediately leaped up and avoided the attack of the silver beam. Otherwise, if the beam had hit his heart, he would have been dead. A strong lingering fear made all the muscles on Wu Qi's body tighten. Just now, his lower abdomen trembled, and he nearly made a fool out of himself. That silver beam had almost killed him. It was just a little bit more, and it would have killed him. Wu Qi let out a furious roar. His eyes shone with a five-colored gleam, and without hesitation, he cried out, "Go!" Immediately after that, the silver lotus flower shot out from the spirit fire pearls slowly opened up, shrouded in a faint five-colored glow, and transformed into a magnificent lotus flower with a circumference of several hundred feet, shielding right in front of the heavenly star positioning disk. 13 beams of destructive light from the spirit fire pearl hit the silver lotus flower in a row, causing the lotus flower to flicker and flicker. Deep, muffled thunderclaps kept ringing out, yet none of them could break the defense on the surface of the silver lotus flower. 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies shot out with a loud whistling noise, and in just a blink of an eye, they had teleported into the bodies of Ling Wuju and his companions. The high-frequency vibrating spatial breaching pearls pierced through their bodies, and in an instant, completely destroyed their corporeal bodies. Ling Wuju let out a miserable howl. His Jin Dan shot up into the sky in a beam of bright light, reaching an altitude of 1,000 feet, and fled towards the outside of Meng Mountains. As a Jin Dan cultivator, his soul had completely fused with his Jin Dan. As long as he could break his gold core and form his nascent soul, he would be able to attain the Earth immortal realm of nascent soul realm. Therefore, as a Jin Dan cultivator, even if his corporeal body was destroyed, he still had the ability to escape. As long as Jin Dan could escape and find a suitable body to possess within 7 days, he would be able to restore his Dharma body, and his cultivation base would not drop too much. But how could Wu Qi allow Ling Wuju to escape? From the pistil of the silver lotus sprayed out countless five-colored light threads, which tightly bound all 4 Jin Dan, including Ling Wuju, and pulled them down from the ground, imprisoning them inside the silver lotus. The heavenly star positioning disk, which had just unleashed 14 destructive light beams from the 6-9 spirit stars, dimmed down and fell slowly to the ground. Although this upper-grade magical treasure was very powerful, and had the power to kill an Earth immortal of nascent soul realm, it also consumed an astronomical amount of energy. Although Ling Wuju and his companions had injected all their energy into the disk, they could only unleash a dozen destructive light beams. Apart from causing Wu Qi to lose a small piece of his flesh, they did not cause any real harm to him. Panting heavily, Wu Qi struggled and leaped up from the ground. In a flurry, he retracted the silver lotus, fire spirit pearl, and all the other magical treasures back into his body, then grabbed the heavenly star positioning disk complacently. The cornerstone treasure of heavenly spirit sect. It's mine now. An upper-grade magical treasure? Just one item spirit, and it can become a spirit item? Are you here to kill someone, or to give me a treasure? After carefully fiddling with the heavenly star positioning disk for a while, Wu Qi, who did not have the time to refine it, shoved it into his storage ring, then sped towards the place where Ling Wuju and his companions were killed. A few shiny storage rings could be seen glinting amidst the mess on the ground. Wu Qi's eyes were gleaming with a green gleam. After a short but intense battle just now, relying on his incredibly strong body and a large number of precious treasures, Wu Qi had killed 5 Jin Dan human immortals of Heavenly Spirit sect. However, the battlefield was in a complete mess. A flaming dragon talisman had blown a large hole in the ground, and the top-grade acquired flame unleashed from the fire spirit pearl had burned the ground to a depth of 30 feet, turning the area several miles in circumference into a clump of lava. Carefully, Wu Qi found 5 storage rings from the lava, then sent his divine sense into them. A loud laughter towered up into the sky. Wu Qi was laughing so hard that his eyes were narrowed into 2 fine lines. Needless to say, there was a huge amount of talismans in the storage rings. These few people were elders of Jin Dan and Heavenly Spirit sect, holding a high position and great power. Every day, when they had nothing to do, they would draw a large number of talismans out of habit. Among them, there were some powerful high-grade talismans that they were reluctant to sell or give away to others. After several hundreds of years of accumulation, these 5 storage rings actually contained over 20,000 powerful talismans of various colors. It made Wu Qi's mouth turn crooked with joy. These were the accumulation of 5 Jin Dan human immortals for several hundreds of years. Every single one of these 20,000 talismans was of excellent quality, and each of them was priceless. Putting aside the energy stones and spirit herbs, they were just enough to replenish the consumption of Wu Qi when he was constructing his secret abodes. As for the other raw materials used to draw talismans, Wu Qi only gave them a brief glance, then threw them aside. What made Wu Qi wild with joy the most was that Ling Wuju, as the elder of imparting technique of Heavenly Spirit sect, actually found in his storage ring was the mystic scripture of talismans, the Heavenly Spirit star positioning technique. It was a book divided into 3 parts, with each part being divided into 13 volumes. It contained all the runes, formations, and restrictive spells of Heavenly Spirit sect, a comprehensive book. From the most basic explosive talisman, to the 9 upper and 9 lower spirit heaven celestial thunderbolt subduing talisman, which had the power equivalent to the full force strike of a nascent divinity heaven immortal, it contained everything one could think of. Clutching the few storage rings tightly in his hand, Wu Qi threw his head back and let out a few loud laughs, then hastily put everything inside into his own storage bracelet. After that, he threaded the rings with some natural silk and hung them around his neck. After tidying up all the storage rings, Wu Qi rushed towards the 4 talisman treasures that were thrown tens of miles away by the explosion. These 4 talisman treasures were treasures that consumed an enormous amount of natural treasures, as well as several hundred years of painstaking effort. Although they were struck by the spirit fire pearl, and the true flame that exploded out from the pearl dispersed the gathered natural energies, the talisman treasures themselves did not suffer any damage. As long as they were slightly refined using the mystic technique of Heavenly Spirit sect, they could be used as excellent materials to construct formations. These talisman treasures were absolutely qualified to be used as the formation cores of a few killing formations. Just as Wu Qi placed the 4 talisman treasures on the ground in a straight line, and was happily admiring the complicated runes engraved on them, an impassioned singing voice was heard coming from afar. How can it be said to have no clothes? To share the same robe with one's son. The king sends his army to repair my spear and spear. To share the same hatred with one's son. How can it be said to have no clothes? To share the same fate with one's son. The king sends his army to repair my spear and halberd. To share the same fate with one's son. How can it be said to have no clothes? To share the same fate with one's son. The king sends his army to repair my armor and weapons. To share the same fate with one's son. The singing voice came from afar with an unconcealable sharpness and murderous aura that soared into the sky. Wu Qi felt a chill running down his spine. He suddenly felt as if he was being stared at by dozens of ferocious beasts, as a faint cold air was exuding from all the pores on his body. Slowly turning around, Wu Qi saw a burly man, clad in a pale red heavy armor, carrying a tiger-headed spear on his shoulder. He was leading a group of 7 to 8 warriors, each clad in a dark heavy armor, and a few dozens of warriors clad in a dark soft armor. They had formed into a crescent moon formation that had no loopholes, and were slowly approaching Wu Qi. These warriors walked towards Wu Qi as if they were on a spring outing, as if nothing had happened, and they were even singing. However, their gray and emotionless eyes were locked onto Wu Qi's body. from top to bottom. As long as it was a part of his body where he could launch an attack, he would be stared at by one or a few of them. On top of that, they seemed to be walking casually, but no matter how they walked, the crescent moon formation would never move. The burly man with the tiger-headed spear giggled, then turned to look at Wu Qi from a distance of about 1 mile away and said, "Hand over all your energy stones and kill yourself right here, and I'll spare your soul for reincarnation." The burly man's laughter was bright, yet it was filled with a bloody aura of Azura. Chapter 162. Looking at the group of warriors, who were emanating a strong smell of blood from their bodies and had an aura that made them look like wolves and leopards, Wu Qi put away everything around him and slowly retreated backward. Every time those warriors took a step forward, he would take a step back. Unhurriedly, he kept a distance of 2,000 feet from them. While retreating, Wu Qi laughed and said, "That's not creative at all. If you want to rob me, so be it. Why do you make it sound like you have done me a great favor? You are a prostitute, so why do you want to erect a chastity?" The man with the tiger-headed spear frowned and looked at Wu Qi, then said coolly, "I know you are a prostitute, but what is a chastity?" The memory of Lu Xiaobai in Wu Qi's soul suddenly flickered. He said happily, "So you don't know the meaning of this sentence? You are just an uncultured, boorish fellow. Hee, what I mean is, you are a man like Dao Chuo, so why do you talk about benevolence, righteousness, and morality like Confucius? I don't like the idea of leaving me a broken soul for reincarnation. Be careful, don't get yourself killed here." The burly man grinned and grinned like a ferocious tiger that had been provoked. Then he laughed sinisterly. He shook his head and did not say a word. Instead, he waved the tiger-head wind-cracking spear and increased his speed, chasing after Wu Qi. His heavy footsteps collided with the ground, causing the ground to tremble slightly. Both of his feet had turned blurry, and he leaped towards Wu Qi along with a strong gust of wind. Wu Qi looked at the man smilingly. Suddenly, both of his feet turned blurry as well, and he moved backward along with a strong gust of wind. Coldly, he stared at this man, who had the cultivation base of late stage of Jin Dan realm, while silently calculating the distance between him and the few human immortals and the dozens of embryonic breath Taoists behind him. As long as this man was more than 1,000 feet away from his subordinates, Wu Qi was confident that he could kill him in the shortest time possible. The few Jin Dan human immortals behind the burly man had vaguely linked up with the Xiantian Taoist masters behind them, forming a military killing formation. For cultivators, any formation was dangerous. Thus, they needed to be vigilant. Wu Qi would not risk being surrounded by the crescent moon killing array to kill this man. Even if he was confident that he could kill everyone in front of him with the least amount of effort, there was no need for him to take unnecessary risks. The two of them, one chasing and the other fleeing, ran for 3 miles in an instant. After running for 3 miles, Wu Qi's upper body didn't move at all. He faced the man who was chasing after him with a sinister sneer on his face. The burly man's expression became more and more ferocious. The muscles on his face tightened and his eyes turned red as if they were about to bleed. All of a sudden, the distance between the burly man and his subordinates was already 1,000 feet, out of the range of the crescent moon killing array. Wu Qi let out a long and sonorous cry. Suddenly, the sword of greedy wolf shot out from his mouth, transforming into 3 large wooden stakes, each about 10 feet long and 2 feet thick, enshrouded in a strong green wind, thrusting towards the burly man's head. 7 wolf heads could be vaguely seen on both sides of the wooden stakes. As long as the burly man revealed even the slightest mistake, they would be able to seize the opportunity and kill him, seizing his blood essence and life force. The burly man let out a wild laugh. Abruptly, the tiger-headed spear let out a deep, deep whistling noise. A clump of blood-red light shot out from the spear, transforming into a dozen of several feet long blood-red beams that leaped up into the sky and tangled with the 3 wooden stakes. The tiger-headed spear transformed into a 30 feet long, blood-red tiger, roaring and fighting fiercely with the 7 wolf heads. With a wild laugh, the burly man pulled out the sword with his right hand and threw it into the air. The sword transformed into a 10-feet-long blood-red beam and hacked down towards Wu Qi's head. After that, he curled up his body and leaped forward, spreading his arms and grabbing towards Wu Qi. Wu Qi let out a loud laugh. Then, a golden gleam flashed from his mouth, and the golden coin that could knock down a flying sword had been shot out from his mouth. It transformed into a huge golden coin the size of a water tank, thrusting towards the blood-red beam above his head. A misty gleam shot out from the eye of the golden coin, quickly slicing off the blood-red beam on the flying sword, revealing the true form of the flying sword. In just a blink of an eye, the flying sword was sliced off by the golden coin and fell to the ground, bouncing and bouncing like a living creature. While laughing joyfully, Wu Qi stared at the burly man and cried out, "Come, let's have a contest of strength." Then, he shook his arms, exerting a divine strength of several tens of thousands of kilograms with his indestructible aura, thrusting towards the approaching fists of the burly man. A muffled boom rang out when the fists and palms collided with each other. The burly man coughed out a mouthful of blood and was knocked flying away by the tremendous force. Wu Qi let out a muffled snort as well, as he staggered and staggered back by the mighty force coming from the burly man's arms. The strength of the burly man was very strong. Although the strength of his body was not as strong as Wu Qi, the strength he could unleash in an instant was equal to the strength of Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi merely possessed a very strong and indestructible body, but the burly man had cultivated a technique that specialized in body strengthening. Not only was it a body strengthening technique, it was also a righteous body strengthening technique that was at least 10 times more powerful than the evil technique of Shi Tianma and his son, who were cultivating the body of half-demon beast. Although the strength of his body was only less than 1/20th of Wu Qi's, by relying on the divine abilities found in the body strengthening technique, the strength unleashed by the burly man was more than enough to fight evenly with Wu Qi. However, Wu Qi's body was too strong. Therefore, although the burly man's strength was equal to Wu Qi's, when the two enormous forces collided, Wu Qi's body did not suffer any harm, but the bones of the burly man's arms had countless cracks, and all his internal organs had suffered a severe shock. Wu Qi, who was forced to stagger back for tens of steps and still could not stand firmly, cried out in astonishment, "What an incredible strength! What cultivation technique are you cultivating?" On the other side, the burly man laughed wildly and said, "Wonderful! You're just a little man who hasn't even cultivated the Jin Dan, yet you have a fleshly body that is similar to my father's. What kind of natural treasure have you eaten? Young lad, you have a bright future ahead of you, and I, by Qitian, have taken a liking to you. What do you think? Join the army of Daqin and conquer the world for our imperial emperor, fighting for glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. This is a great fortune for you." Not allowing Wu Qi to say anything, Bai Qitian had already cried out, "I, Bai Qitian, the general of Yulin army of Daqin, am recruiting you to join the army of Daqin. Why don't you accept it quickly? With the physique and potential of your body, with just a little training, you will become an invincible and fierce general. This is your luck." Wu Qi, who was staggering backward, nearly tripped on a rock and fell flat on his face. "The general of Yulin army of Daqin, Bai Qitian?" Wu Qi cried out in shock. "Bai Qian, who is your father? With such a big tone, what is the benefit of joining the army of Daqin?" He opened his mouth and coughed out a mouthful of blood, with both of his arms dangling beside his shoulders. Bai Qitian gave Wu Qi a deep look, and with a joyful expression, he let out a loud laugh and said, "My father is the Prince of Wuan of Great Qin Dynasty, the Commander-in-Chief of Military Forces, Bai Qi. Father is thirsty for talent, and he likes young heroes the most. Someone like you, who doesn't know a thing about cultivation, but has frighteningly good luck, joining the army of Daqin is the best." The Prince of Wu and of Daqin, the Governor-General of the army, Bai Qi. Wu Qi's heart and lungs were trembling. The Prince of Wu and of Qin, Bai Qi, was now the Prince of Wu and of Daqin, and the Governor-General of the army? This was the man who was addressed as the butcher by the people of the Warring States period. Even though it had been over 2,000 years, his name still made Wu Qi shiver and feel extremely uncomfortable. He gave Bai Qitian a deep look, then spun and fled without saying a word. The sword of Greedy Wolf let out a long and sharp whistle, transforming into a dark beam and flying back into Wu Qi's hand, no longer tangling with Bai Qitian's spear. Seeing that Wu Qi had turned and fled, Bai Qitian hastened his pace and chased after him. He roared, "Little fellow, I've given you face, but you don't want it. Are you courting death? Either you join the army of Duchin, or you become a wanted criminal of the Duchin. Do you want a high position and great wealth, or be hunted down by the whole world?" Wu Qi turned around and glared at Bai Qitian coldly, sneered and said, "What Duchin dynasty? I've never heard of it." After giving Bai Qitian a fierce glare, Wu Qi bowed his head and fled at the fastest speed. If not because he was intimidated by the brutal reputation of Bai Qi, the demon king of slaughter, Wu Qi would have definitely killed Bai Qitian right here. The problem was, the brutal reputation of Bai Qi was too frightening. Since Bai Qitian was already here, where would Bai Qi be? Wu Qi did not think that with Bai Qitian's insignificant strength, he would be able to cross Meng Mountains and come to a place only 400,000 miles away from Great Yan Dynasty. After becoming one of the influential nobles of Great Yan Dynasty, Wu Qi had learned a lot of information about Meng Mountains from Yan Bugui. It was definitely a mountain range of monstrous scale. Perhaps, it stretched for tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of miles. Over the last 2,000 years, Great Yan Dynasty had lost countless lives, and even several hundred of Jindan human immortals had fallen in this place. Yet they still failed to find out the exact size of Meng Mountains. Bai Qitian was just a little human immortal of late Jindan stage. How could he cross Meng Mountains and come to this place with such a small group of people? Impossible, absolutely impossible. There must be someone even more powerful accompanying him. Who could it be? Bai Qi? Others? Or even? Upon thinking of those infamous figures, Wu Qi felt his scalp going numb. He absolutely did not want to kill Bai Qitian right now. Once he alerted those people behind him, he would be treated like a stray dog. A group of earth immortals of nascent soul realm, or even someone with even more frightening cultivation base, were chasing after him, a little earth immortal of void core realm. When Wu Qi thought of that frightening scene, he felt very pitiful, very pitiful. There was no need, as Wu Qi did not want to poke this hornet's nest. However, even if a man did not go looking for a hornet, the hornet would come looking for him. Not long after Wu Qi sprinted forward for a few miles, a few warriors, clad in black soft armors and treading on wing-shaped magical items, surrounded by a skinny, middle-aged scholar clad in a black robe, blocked his way. Almost instinctively, Wu Qi stopped running, fixing his eyes at the middle-aged scholar, who had a skinny face, dark skin, and a pair of deep sunken eyes. His gaze was glinting with a ghastly gleam, like that of a viper. Bai Qitian, who had been left far behind by Wu Qi, cried out joyfully, "Your Excellency Li Si, Prime Minister Li Si. Catch this guy. I don't know what kind of natural treasure he ate, but with the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, his fleshly body has already reached the indestructible body of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Both of my arms were broken by him." As if he had confirmed that Li Si could defeat Wu Qi, Bai Qitian, who had been chasing after Wu Qi madly, stopped running while gasping for breath, took out a bottle of pills and shoved it into his mouth. Both of his arms were trembling slightly, producing cracking noises. Obviously, his bones were healing quickly. You see, Wu Qi looked at the middle-aged scholar, who had his hands tucked under his sleeves and stood motionless like a great mountain. He cupped his fist, bowed and said hoarsely, "Senior, please make way for me. I don't want to have a falling out with all of you, so please don't push me too far." Rustling noises could be heard coming from all directions, as over 2,000 black-armored warriors emerged from the tall grasses and trees in all directions, surrounding them from a distance. Among about 20 black-armored warriors of Xiantian realm, one of them was a human immortal general of Jindan. Among these 2,000 warriors, there were about 100 human immortals from Jindan. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. He stared at Li Si and prepared himself to risk his life. Chapter 163. After quietly sizing up Wu Qi for a long period of time and waiting until the army of 2,000 soldiers had completely surrounded this area of about 1 mile in circumference, Li Si finally squeezed out a smile from his dry face. He cupped his fist toward Wu Qi, bowed solemnly and said, "My little friend, I'm Li Si, the Prime Minister of Daqin. May I know which sect are you from, and which dynasty is this place under?" Wu Qi looked at Li Si, who had a serious expression on his face and was meticulous in his etiquette. He couldn't help but breathe out a long sigh. He lowered his head and looked at his naked body after the fierce battle just now. Then, he took out a change of clothes from his storage ring, smiled bitterly and asked, "Can you allow me to put on some clothes?" Li Si shook his head slowly. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, revealing a smile that made Wu Qi's blood run cold. Not good. Those who don't wear clothes, no matter it is their behavior, they will look unnatural. Even when they are fleeing, their speed will be reduced by about 20%. Since it can slow down my little friend's speed, why should I let you put on some clothes? With a malicious smile on his face, Li Si continued slowly, "Let's talk like this. We are all men here, so it's not a big deal for us to not wear clothes. Let's not talk about the etiquette anymore. We are in the wilderness, and the etiquette is a vulgar thing that should never be mentioned. Stinks." Wu Qi tightened his grip on the clothes. Once again he breathed out a deep sigh. He looked at Li Si helplessly, while countless thoughts were flashing and spinning in his mind. Among them, there was even a plan of submitting to Daqin, leading them into Ji City and annexing Great Yan Dynasty. But suddenly he thought of Lu Chengfeng, Yan Bugui, Yan Zhuhui, and Princess Zhonglu. He even thought of the 2 personal serving ladies of Princess Zhonglu, both of whom were the people of Great Yan Dynasty. His face darkened gradually. Unhurriedly, Wu Qi began to put on his clothes. Li Si's expression changed slightly, and he said in an indifferent tone, "If my little friend puts on another shirt, I'll kill you." Looking at Li Si, Wu Qi put on his clothes as fast as he could. "I've never seen a psychopath like you," he said coolly. "In order to prevent someone from escaping, you even forbid him from wearing clothes? If your children fall into my hands in the future, I'll strip them and throw them on the street, so that everyone can judge them." "How dare you!" A black-armored warrior standing behind Li Si gave a furious roar, drawing his blade and thrusting it towards Wu Qi. The blade rose up into the air, and the black-armored warrior's body left behind dozens of afterimages. With a simple swing of the blade, he suddenly arrived next to Wu Qi. A large sheet of flame burst out from his body, and a flame several tens of feet long burst out from the blade as well, bringing with it a terrifyingly high temperature that could melt gold and iron. The blade thrust straight towards Wu Qi's neck. A deep, muffled explosion burst out from his body, as the massive fire element energy in the warrior's body was detonated by the innate fire element energy. Like a drop of fire sparks falling into an oil tank, the explosion went out of control. A deep, muffled explosion rang out, as the massive fire element energy in the warrior's body was detonated by the innate fire element energy. Like a drop of fire sparks falling into an oil tank, the explosion went out of control. Countless purplish-red flames burst out from all the pores on the warrior's body, instantly melting his body and turning his armor into a puddle of molten iron. In just a blink of an eye, a living man was burned into nothingness. Wu Qi held the blade tightly in his hand, weighed it in his hand, sneered and said, "An upper-grade magical item, a good item. The market price is 100,000 gold coins. I'll take it." Casually putting the blade into his storage ring, Wu Qi continued putting on his clothes. He did not even look at Li Si, who had a gloomy face. Taking a deep breath, Li Si said with a deep voice, "You've killed a warrior of Daqin, and you deserve the death penalty. Today, I sentence you to the grave crime of wiping out your entire clan." Dozens of warriors of embryonic breath Tier, Chi-Chi, let out a war cry. At the same time, a large sheet of flame burst out from their bodies, as they raised their blades and formed into a crescent moon-killing formation, charging towards Wu Qi. Wherever they went, the trees and grasses were turned into ashes, and even the dark soil was burned into a grayish-white clay by the high-temperature flame shot out from their feet. With just a single war cry, they had arrived next to Wu Qi at the same time. They raised their blades up high, but before they could hack down towards Wu Qi, who was in the middle of tying his belt, flicked his fingers, shooting out dozens of fire sparks and piercing into the bodies of these warriors. Once again, it was the innate fire element energy that detonated the fire element energy in these warriors' bodies. As they were proficient in fire element cultivation techniques, there was no way they could control the pure and brutal innate energy that contained a tiny bit of the natural law. Their innate energies quickly burst out like a bomb. Dozens of torches were set ablaze, and a purple-red flame burst out from the bodies of these warriors, turning their bodies and armors into nothingness at the same time. With a wave of his sleeve, Wu Qi threw the dozens of blades into his storage ring. He looked at Li Si, sneered and said, "Thank you, thank you. Another few million gold coins. May I ask you, are you here to kill or to give me gifts?" Li Si stared blankly at Wu Qi. His brows were twitching, and no one knew what he was thinking. Bai Qian, who had just healed the wounds on his arms, cursed furiously, "What an audacious young man. I thought you were a talented man, and that's why I wanted to recruit you. But not only did you fail to appreciate my kindness, you even dared to kill my men. You deserve 1,000 deaths. Somebody, capture him alive, and torture him carefully." 20 early-stage Jin Dan captains left the troop and formed 2 small crescent-killing formations, pressing towards Wu Qi from left and right. 20 long swords transformed into 10-feet-long beams of light and wheeled above their heads. Loud and clear noises kept coming out from the bodies of these early-stage Jin Dan captains. Obviously, they had been cultivating with a special body-strengthening technique, and were concentrating on controlling the energy in their bodies. Seeing that these captains were about to fight Wu Qi, Li Si suddenly cried out in a low voice, "Stop! Let me talk to him." Those captains turned a deaf ear to Li Si's words, and kept approaching Wu Qi. Bai Qitian raised his head abruptly and stared at Li Si. With a pair of bloodshot eyes, he said with a deep voice, "Prime Minister, I've been rude. This man killed my men, and I can't let him go. Once I capture him alive, I'll let you talk to him." Li Si gave Bai Qitian an indifferent look. Indifferently, he rolled up his arms and said, "Fine." Grinning coldly, Li Si brought a dozen men, who were clad in the same black robe and dressed like scholars, and slowly retreated several hundred feet back. Bai Qitian's eyes narrowed, then he stared at Wu Qi and cried out, "Crescent, kill!" 20 sword beams fell from the sky with a shrill whistling noise. Although they seemed to be messy, but in fact, they were in perfect order, hacking towards the meridians and joints of Wu Qi's hands and feet. If he was hit by the sword beams here, Wu Qi would only lose the ability to move, but his life would not be in danger. Clearly, Bai Qitian's order to capture Wu Qi alive had been carried out perfectly by his subordinates. Meanwhile, the 20 Jin Dan captains, who were human immortals, leaped towards Wu Qi with deep, muffled whistles of wind breaking. After retreating several hundred feet back, Li Si suddenly cried out, "General Cheiji, have you forgotten? The Dharma body of an earth immortal is not something they can break." Before his words could fade away, miserable howls had already been heard. A 5-colored gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes, as he let the 20 sword beams fall viciously on his body. After that, the sword of Greedy Wolf let out a sonorous howl of a wolf, transforming into a cold beam that looked like a dark water wave and was dripping with water vapor, sweeping towards those captains. The sword beams let out a shrill cry, as they brought up a large number of sparks on Wu Qi's body before being knocked flying away by a tremendous force. Although these Jin Dan captains had cultivated the technique of body tempering, their bodies were still cut into halves by the sword beams, and they died on the spot. Casually, Wu Qi grabbed 20 thumb-sized Jin Dan weapons, which had yet to completely solidify, and were mixed with a faint golden gleam, in his hand. While laughing wildly, he forcefully kept the flying swords and armors of these captains into his storage ring. After that, a beam of yellow light burst out from the surface of his body as he plunged into the ground. Bai Qitian was caught unprepared by the tragic death of his elite captains. He stared blankly at the 40 pieces of corpses on the ground, then suddenly roared furiously, "Damn it! The Dharma body of an Earth immortal. Even if a human immortal of Jin Dan wields a lower-grade magical treasure, he could never hurt it. This bastard!" With a wild killing intent, Bai Qitian let out a loud roar and charged towards Wu Qi, thrusting the tiger-headed spear towards Wu Qi's chest while letting out a violent tiger roar. Wu Qi had exercised the escape art of Earth, and half of his body had sunk into the ground. He stared coldly at Bai Qitian, who was leaping towards him. He fished out 3 purple gold talismans from his storage ring and gave Bai Qitian a strange smile. Casually activating the talismans, Wu Qi pointed the talismans at Bai Qitian, then plunged half of his body into the ground. All of a sudden, the 3 golden purple talismans were set ablaze. A clump of dark cloud appeared out of nowhere in the sky. Accompanied by a deafening rumble, 18 golden thunderbolts, each as thick as a water bucket, came whistling down from the sky, bringing with them an aura of annihilation that seemed to be able to destroy everything. These were the 3 night golden thunder talismans, crafted by a human immortal talisman master from Heavenly Spirit sect. The power of each thunderbolt was equal to a full-force strike unleashed by a middle-stage Jin Dan cultivator. With 18 thunderbolts smashing down at the same time, even a late-stage Jin Dan human immortal with the protection of a magical treasure would not be able to withstand it. 18 thunderbolts struck Bai Qitian squarely on his head. The explosion charred his skin and made him look like a scarecrow blown by a strong gust of wind. He was thrown several hundred feet away like a scarecrow, howling and howling as he lay on the ground, unable to move even a little bit. Wu Qi let out a long cry, turned his head over his shoulder and gave Li Si a few provocative laughs. Apart from his head, his entire body had sunk into the ground. It was at this moment that Li Si struck. Slowly, he fished out a jade-colored scroll that was enshrouded in a golden glow and purple mist. Slowly, he unfolded it, then pulled out a writing brush made from some unknown material, which had a purple gold handle and a faint golden gleam. Casually, he wrote a character, mountain, on the scroll. With a casual flick of his hand, the character, which had just taken shape, flew out from the scroll. "Dharma word, mountain, suppressing heaven and earth," cried Li Si. Following his cry, the natural energies within an area of 100 miles in circumference suddenly began to stir, while countless strands of Earth Yuan Ling energy began to rapidly gather in his direction. In just a fraction of a second, a mountaintop, over 100 feet tall and over 1,000 feet in circumference, suddenly appeared above Wu Qi's head. A heavy and suffocating pressure came pressing down from afar, making Wu Qi's body sink, and his movement become a few times slower. Accompanied by a muffled swooshing noise, the mountaintop fell down from the sky, pressing down viciously towards Wu Qi's head. Looking at the mountaintop that was pressing down from above, Wu Qi gave a shrill cry with fear. Disregarding everything else, he exerted all the innate earth energy in his earth meridians and exercised the innate earth escape art with all his might, transforming his body into a stream of yellow earth energy and plunging into the ground. Rumble! A loud boom rang out. Right after Wu Qi plunged into the ground, the mountaintop smashed right on the spot where he was just a moment ago. The ground shook violently, and over 2,000 Qin soldiers in the surroundings were thrown off their feet, while those with slightly weaker cultivation base fell to the ground while coughing blood. Chapter 164. When Wu Qi was less than 100 feet into the ground, a tremendous force came smashing down on his head. His indestructible body, which was a few times stronger than that of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm, could only resist for a fraction of a second before he was nearly crushed by the tremendous force. Cracking noises could be heard coming from all over Wu Qi's body, and he was nearly crushed. Blood kept bursting out from his 7 apertures. The tremendous pressure was like a juicer, trying to squeeze everything out of his body. Wu Qi could still withstand the pressure of a small mountain. After all, Earth immortals of nascent soul realm had the divine ability to carry mountains and oceans. However, this mountain was not only extremely heavy, It also contained an enormous magnetic force of acquired Earth. This magnetic force had absorbed the soil within a circumference of 100 miles, connecting all the underground energy veins into one, and formed a tremendous force that pressed down on Wu Qi. An Earth immortal of nascent soul realm could easily withstand the pressure of a large mountain, but when it came to a piece of land with a circumference of 100 miles, not to mention an Earth immortal of nascent soul realm, even a heaven immortal who had cultivated his nascent divinity would not dare to be smashed by a piece of land with a circumference of 100 miles. The terrible weight of millions of tons could crush any ordinary immortal into pieces. Wu Qi coughed out 3 mouthfuls of blood. Abruptly, the silver lotus, which had a vague connection with his mind, shot out from between his brows, unleashing a large sheet of lotus petal-shaped light that enveloped Wu Qi's body, firmly protecting him within the stamen of the lotus. No matter how the tremendous force came crashing down from all directions, the silver lotus remained unmoved. Following Wu Qi's will, it brought Wu Qi's body and slowly sank into the ground. After absorbing the innate energies of 5 elements found in Wu Qi's energy veins, the silver lotus, which was originally a pure metal element, had gradually taken on a hint of innate energies of 5 elements. Therefore, it was able to use the earth escape technique to slowly sink into the ground. Earth yellow light visible to the naked eyes was swirling rapidly in all directions, as if several dozens of Yangtze and Yellow rivers were rushing back and forth under the ground. A tremendous force of earth energy swept across an area of 100 miles in circumference. If Wu Qi's fleshly body was still in this land, it would have been crushed into the tiniest soil particles. The scroll and brush in Li Si's hands were unknown to him, and he didn't know what kind of secret technique he used. It was just a casual word, a sentence, but it had almost killed Wu Qi on the spot. Panting and coughing out mouthful after mouthful of blood, Wu Qi lay on the silver lotus with his eyes wide open. He raised his head and stared at the ground, which looked as if a Category 12 typhoon had just broken out, and cried out harshly, "Li Si, there is no enmity between us, but you've killed me so brutally. I will not stop until one of us is dead. So what if you are Li Si? So what if you are the Prime Minister of Daqin? So what if your cultivation is higher than mine? Didn't you also have 3 of your clans slaughtered by someone back then?" A valiant aura rose from the bottom of his heart, and the will to fight that belonged to Wu Wang rushed straight into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. He leaped up and roared furiously, "Li Si, I'm going to kill you. Ha ha, just you wait, I'm going to teach you a good lesson." Panting and gasping, Wu Qi sat down on the silver lotus. For a moment, countless vicious and vengeful methods popped up in Wu Qi's mind. Wu Qi couldn't help but admire Li Xiaobai, whose soul had fused with his own. How could she come up with so many vicious strategies? Wu Qi would never admit that some of these strategies were created by himself. It must be a strategy that only a heartless person like Li Xiaobai could come up with. Gnashing his teeth, Wu Qi took out a healing pill and shoved it into his mouth, hastily treating the injuries on his body. After that, Wu Qi took out the 20 early-stage Jin Dan pills he had collected just now and threw them into his mouth. The quality of these Jin Dan pills was not high, and the amount of innate nectar in Jin Dan was very small. Therefore, all 10 false cores of Wu Qi could barely light up a little bit. On the contrary, the acquired innate energy of 5 elements, which he cultivated using the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements in his main meridians, had shrunk to a degree that was a few times more flexible and dense than mercury. The innate energy in his meridians, which looked like a tangible substance, was rolling and rolling along with the sound of waves. Riding on the silver lotus, Wu Qi descended 100 miles, then flew away in a slanted direction. When he was at a distance of 100 miles, he let the silver lotus shield him and carefully crawled out from the ground. He chose a dark and dense forest and came out from it. With a gloomy face, Wu Qi retracted the silver lotus back into his spiritual ocean and took off all his clothes. From his storage ring, he fished out a set of dark green soft armor, which was commonly worn by secret agents of scouting office when they were out in the wild. Although the soft armor looked inconspicuous, it was actually a magical item of good quality. There were dozens of nested aura-concealing talismans made by the expert talisman masters of Heavenly Spirit's sect on the soft armor, which allowed the wearer to run without stirring up any wind, and would never produce any sound of wind breaking. On top of that, it had the miraculous effect of concealing one's aura and hiding one's body. After putting on the soft armor, Wu Qi covered his entire head with a soft leather hood that came together with the armor. After that, he carefully tidied himself up and put away all kinds of magical items that he might be able to use, especially the talismans he obtained from the 5 Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit sect. After that, he carefully exercised the escape art of innate wood element and rushed towards the place where he was ambushed just now. Wu Qi had a belly full of resentment in his heart. The reason why Elder Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit sect were hunting him down was because he had ruined their source of wealth, and that was a personal grudge. Therefore, it was perfectly reasonable for them to seek revenge on each other. However, he did not know Li Si by Qitian or the Qin dynasty, and he had never had any dealings with them. Therefore, when Li Si and Bai Qitian attacked him abruptly and with a deadly strike, Wu Qi could not accept it. He had to get revenge, And he had to make Li Si and Bai Qitian suffer so much pain that they would never forget Wu Qi for the rest of their lives. Wu Qi clenched his teeth tightly, transformed his body into a wisp of green mist that looked like a ghost, and sped through the countless trees and grasses in the forest. While running at full speed, he was thinking in his mind. If not because he was 400,000 miles deep into Meng Mountains, where he could not mobilize the army of Great Yan Dynasty, he would definitely inform Yan Dan immediately, asking Yan Dan to assemble an army of several million soldiers and force Li Si and his men to stay in this mountain range. Surely, Yan Dan would be very willing to kill Li Si with the army of the entire dynasty. In the past, the Crown Prince of Yan Dynasty and the Prime Minister of Qin Dynasty must have had a lot of enmity between them. But too bad, he was now 400,000 miles deep into Meng Mountains. It was impossible for him to assemble an army here. The demon beasts and natural strongholds along the way were more than enough to devour any army. While running at full speed, all kinds of thoughts were tumbling in his mind. Carefully, Wu Qi came to the place where he was ambushed just now. Li Si and his men were still at the same spot. 20 campfires were burning fiercely, burning the bodies of 20 Jin Dan generals who were killed by Bai Qitian. Li Si was standing right next to the campfire, singing a funeral song with an ancient and desolate tune. His voice was sonorous and piercing into the clouds, making Wu Qi feel extremely uncomfortable. Carefully, Wu Qi crouched in the long grass between a few big trees, staring coldly at Li Si and his men. When the corpses of the dead generals had turned into ashes, Bai Qitian took out a few white porcelain jars and collected the ashes. While collecting the scorching hot ashes, he turned to Li Si and cried out resentfully, "Prime Minister, why didn't you strike earlier? You've caused me to lose so many of my subordinates. How am I going to explain this to my father later?" Wu Qi's heart sank. Judging from Bai Qitian's words, Bai Qi was indeed here. Li Si narrowed his eyes and kept staring at the darkening sky, as if he was having a mental journey. He did not give any explanation to Bai Qitian. Bai Qitian shouted angrily, but when he saw Li Si's expression, he had no choice but to shut his mouth obediently. Obviously, he did not have the courage to have a falling out with Li Si. Whether it was in terms of experience or position, he was too far behind Li Si. When Bai Qitian was done packing everything, Li Si came back to his senses and said coolly, "Let's go back to the camp. I wonder how many energy stones the others have collected during the past few days. If they are not enough, we'll have to stay here for a few more days." Li Si gave a glance at a small hill that was several hundred feet deep into the ground not far away, then said confidently, "Although you've lost some subordinates, I've also killed that little fellow on the spot. He was a lucky little fellow who possessed an indestructible body. The credit of killing him is equal to that of half an Earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Although you've lost 20 Jin Dan soldiers, you've done nothing wrong. So, you don't have to be too calculative about it." Bai Qitian stared coldly at Li Si, sneered and said, "This little fellow was killed by Prime Minister himself, so I dare not claim any credit. Boys, let's retreat and return to the camp." Send out some scouts along the way, and if we bump into any barbarian villages, we'll collect some energy stones along the way. Wu Qi, who had his eyes hidden behind the light green crystal mask on his head, nodded silently. Bai Qitian and his men were collecting energy stones? Very good, very good. The main group of Qin army slowly broke camp and left the place. Li Si, together with a dozen of his attendants, was the last to leave. Hiding his hands under his sleeves, he stared at the small hill that was several hundred feet deep into the ground. After a long while, he nodded and said, "He should be dead. He is just a little boy, so how could he withstand a single strike from me? Hehe, disperse." With a wave of his sleeve, the small hill immediately transformed into countless strands of earth element energy and dispersed in all directions. Only then did the magnetic energy gathered by the small hill slowly disperse. A muffled boom that sounded like a thunderclap rang out from the ground, causing the surrounding trees and grasses to shake violently. Stepping on the wing-shaped magical items, the Qin army flew toward the west, while Li Si and his men were flying in the middle of the group. Wu Qi exercised his escape art and followed behind them, flying westward. Along the way, he saw several hundred barbarian villages that had been completely slaughtered. The fire in some villages had not been extinguished yet. Obviously, they had just been slaughtered and looted by the Qin army. When they passed by a lofty mountain, Wu Qi stood on top of the mountain and looked around. Using his spirit eyes, Wu Qi could see an area of several thousand miles from the lofty mountain. Within the circumference of several thousand miles, he saw many similar fires rising from many places. Obviously, the Qin army was slaughtering barbarians everywhere. In the southwest direction, because the fires in the villages had set the forest ablaze, an area of several hundred miles in circumference of the forest was ablaze. However, no one was there to deal with it. The conflagration sent smoke and dust soaring high into the sky, while a sorrowful and destructive aura lingered in the direction. Qin army, Qin army. Wu Qi's heart felt heavy. The barbarians in this place were truly unlucky. Their ancestors had escaped from the war blade of Great Yan Dynasty, but now, they had fallen under the butcher blade of Qin army. In short, they were really unlucky. Following closely behind Li Si and his men, they flew over 5,000 miles westward. Surrounded by mountains, they came to a basin that measured about 100 miles in circumference. It was a flat grassland in the basin, densely packed with Chi-Chi's tents. Countless soldiers clad in black armors and stepping on wing-shaped magical items were gathering towards this basin from all directions. Wu Qi did a rough calculation and found that there were about 30,000 tents in this place. Judging from the size and scale of the tents, if each tent could accommodate 10 soldiers, there were at least several 100,000 Qin soldiers in this place. In the middle of the tents was a wooden city built with logs. Although the buildings were simple, they were still rather large. They stood in the middle of the wooden city. Above one of the palaces in the middle of the city stood a 200 feet tall flagpole, and on top of it was a black dragon flag, several tens of feet in circumference, waving menacingly in the wind. Shockingly, this was a field headquarters of Qin army. With just a cursory sensing, Wu Qi had sensed several hundred powerful auras hiding in this field headquarters, which made his heart tremble with fear. Each of these auras was exactly the same as the aura he sensed from Yandan. Chapter 165. From the wooden city in the middle, for groups of strange men, each clad in a long black robe and wearing a tall round hat, walked out slowly. They walked out from the 4 city gates of the wooden city and came to the 4 main gates of the campsite. A deep and powerful incantation was heard. Along with the incantation, the natural energies in the basin began to fluctuate chaotically. Through Wu Qi's spirit eyes, he could see the natural energies were disturbed into tiny energy molecules, mixing together in a messy manner like a pot of porridge that kept boiling. The ground was covered with long grass, and as Wu Qi possessed the escape art of innate wood element, he was like a fish in the water, sneaking into the campsite without alerting anyone. There was a mystic technique in Scroll of Stealing that allowed one to avoid these primordial runes. As the black-robed men who deployed these defensive mechanisms did not have a profound cultivation of primordial runes, Wu Qi was able to easily avoid several dozens of defensive mechanisms and sneak into the campsite. In this grand hall, they were just lowly serving ladies. Deep in the mountain, the sky turned dark quickly. Wu Qi was standing on top of a lofty mountain on the eastern side of the basin, looking at the distant horizon. The setting sun had not yet set, but the basin in front of him was already covered by the curtain of night. Torches were lit up everywhere, and a large group of soldiers were patrolling the campsite in a neat formation, guarding it so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. According to the scroll of stealing, when one cultivated these primordial runes to an extremely profound level, one rune could shatter a star, one rune could grow flesh and bones, one rune could bring a dead man back to life, one rune could change the world, one rune could even change the position of the stars. It possessed an unimaginably magical power. However, the scroll of stealing only recorded the method to deal with and decipher these runes. As for the cultivation method of these runes, there was only a chapter called Book of Ancient God, which made Wu Qi confused. With great effort, he calmed his surging emotions and restrained his aura. Using a mystic technique in Scroll of Stealing, he covered his entire body with innate 5 elements energies, merging his body with the 5 elements of the heaven and earth. Then, soundlessly, Wu Qi went straight into the last wooden palace. The defense of this wooden palace was extremely tight, as it was surrounded by defensive mechanisms made of primordial runes. There were a total of 300 Jin Dan human immortals guarding the palace, and even those serving ladies who were dressed in long black dresses and carrying basins and towels in their hands had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi dived back into the ground and carefully made his way to the last palace. According to the layout of this place, the first hall should be used for banquets, the second hall should be the place where secrets were discussed, and the third hall should be the residence of the person with the highest status here. However, he did not know whether the person living inside was Li Si or Bai Qi. One of them was the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains, and the other was the Prime Minister. Could it be that they were sharing this hall? Amidst the chaotic energy porridge, a large number of spirit runes suddenly emerged and formed. These runes, which had all 5 elements, were connected from head to tail, and like agile snakes, they laid out several dozens of early warning mechanisms around, above, and under the camp. Once any living being touched these mechanisms, a loud noise and blinding light would burst out, which would be more than enough to alert the army in the camp. Some of these runes even contained frightening explosive energy. If someone touched these runes, the explosive energy would be more than enough to severely injure a human immortal of early Jin Dan realm. They were not old ladies who had taken some pills to maintain their youthful appearance, but teenage girls who were in the prime of their youth. This was what surprised Wu Qi. There were nearly 100 serving ladies here, and each of them was a young and beautiful teenage girl, possessing the cultivation base of Xiantian realm. In Ji City, the number of young men who possessed the cultivation base of Xiantian realm at their age that Wu Qi had seen, perhaps these were the most he had ever seen. The palaces in the wooden city were arranged in a straight line right in the center. The 3 palaces were the main palaces, and there were 3 side palaces on the left and right. Currently, the first main palace was brightly lit. Through the open door, Wu Qi could see a long table that was neatly arranged. Some imperial eunuchs clad in black robes were carefully placing all kinds of tableware and wine vessels on the table. Some military officers, who obviously possessed the cultivation base of Jin Dan realm, clad in heavy armors, were patrolling outside the main palace. Wu Qi's heart was pounding rapidly, and the blood vessels on his temples were throbbing painfully. Wu Qi was panting heavily, and his eyes were glowing brightly. Carefully, very carefully, he peeked out a pair of eyes from underneath a candlestick with a complicated design in the corner of the main palace. Wu Qi looked towards the direction where the pressure was coming from. He saw a dragon bed, and a middle-aged man with a naked body and an emperor crown on his head was sitting upright on it. Hee, you are indeed a demon dragon who has almost become a heaven immortal. Ingzheng has been too careless. This world is still not the place where Ingzheng can look down upon. Primordial Talisman. Suddenly, Wu Qi's eyes shone brightly. Needless to say, the Book of Ancient God was an extremely precious scripture. Otherwise, it would not have been collected by that shadowy figure into the scroll of stealing and passed down. However, because it was too profound and magical, Wu Qi could not understand it at all. However, it seemed like these men in black robes before him had inherited a part of the Tao of Primordial Talisman. Perhaps, he could find a way to advance in the study of Primordial Talisman from them. A few serving ladies were soaking white silk handkerchiefs in hot water, wiping away the dirty blood that flowed out from the man's wounds. Obviously, he was exercising a mystic technique to heal himself. He gave a few loud laughs, then clenched his teeth and roared furiously, "But sooner or later, this world will be under Ing Zheng's control. That demon dragon, I sentence him to have his entire clan executed, and all his clan members executed." However, for an elite army like the Qin army, it would not be a hindrance to them even if they did not have any rations or weapons in this forest that was rich in natural resources. There were no livestock sheds in the military camp, and all the soldiers had to fly in the sky with the help of those wing-shaped magical items. It was unnecessary for them to ride on their mounts in the forest. Therefore, if Wu Qi wanted to burn down the livestock sheds and cause a commotion, there was nothing he could do. The Book of Ancient God had a total of 36,000 words, and each of them was ancient and simple, emanating an aura that came from a long time ago. Each of the 36,000 words contained a profound principle of the heaven and earth, and possessed an incredible power. However, the shadowy figure who passed the scroll of stealing to Wu Qi had only focused on teaching him the main cultivation techniques, such as the 7 Foundation Establishment Technique. As for those precious scriptures like the Book of Ancient God, which were obviously stolen by the shadowy figure, he had mentioned them, but he did not give any detailed explanation, nor did he give any cultivation advice to Wu Qi. It looked like a banquet was going to be held here later, and presumably, all the higher-ups of Qin army in this field headquarters would be attending the banquet. The Qin army headquarters measured several dozens of miles in both width and length, and was surrounded by a ring of mud walls, fences, traps, and trenches. Tens of layers of complicated fortifications had tightly encircled the entire field headquarters. Between the mud walls, fences, and trenches were several hundred watchtowers. Elite soldiers were stationed on top of these watchtowers, and ballistae and other weapons with powerful destructive force were deployed on top of these watchtowers. Although it was a field headquarters, the defensive strength of this barracks, together with those defensive runes, might not be any weaker than the defense of Ji City. A dragon roar was heard coming from Ing Zheng's body, as a clump of dark water vapor soared up into the sky. Amidst the water vapor were the shadows of 8 flood dragons and a horned serpent, wriggling crazily. A tremendous pressure that felt like it was a real substance came rushing at Wu Qi's face. It was as if he was punched in the face, and when the pressure struck his eyes, it gave him a severe pain and nearly caused tears to flow out from his eyes. Following that, a dozen serving ladies, who were carrying buckets made of pure gold, silver trays, and soft white silk handkerchiefs, walked into the hall. Wu Qi, who was hiding a few feet under the ground, immediately sensed a tremendous, vast, and endless pressure pressing down on his head. Carefully, Wu Qi poked his head out from behind a pillar and gave these serving ladies a glance. Who was the emperor of the Qin dynasty? Who should it be? Who could it be? The wound had nearly pierced through the chest of the middle-aged man, from his chest to his back. A few places on his body were pierced through, and light could be seen from the front to the back. From the wound, it looked like the claw of some huge beast had brutally scratched him. Vaguely, there was still a sticky demonic energy that one could see with naked eyes, and it was crazily corroding the man's body. Wu Qi did not pay any attention to the man's face. He just stared at the huge and ferocious wound on his chest with great shock. Wu Qi stared at these black-robed men with great astonishment. In Scroll of Stealing, there was a description about this method of stirring the natural energies and condensing them into restrictive runes out of thin air. It was a Tao of talisman that was completely different from the orthodox Qi refining cultivators. It was a system of Tao of talisman that was even more ancient than that of Qi refining cultivators, a system of primordial talisman that pointed directly to the Tao of using the natural energies. After a full 15 minutes, the man suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of dark blood. After that, he coughed violently and laughed out loud. Taking the opportunity when the soldiers were lining up and having their meals, and the sentries were changing shifts, it was inevitable that the campsite would become a little chaotic, and the vigilance would inevitably be weakened. Wu Qi's body had completely transformed into a clump of hazy green mist, moving along countless long grasses, and deftly sneaking into the campsite of Qin army. Shaking his head helplessly, Wu Qi secretly cursed the people who had made the Qin army so tightly organized, without leaving any loopholes for him to exploit. Then, he carefully sneaked into the wooden city located right in the center. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Wu Qi came to the edge of the wooden city, which measured about 1 mile in both width and length. He came out from a remote corner of a wooden palace. He found nothing in the campsite. Apart from the barracks of soldiers, there were only the kitchen and toilets. Wu Qi roughly understood what was going on. In this place, most likely, all the provisions and armaments were carried by those powerful cultivators using storage magical treasures. Therefore, no matter what ideas Wu Qi had in mind, it was impossible for him to do anything to those provisions and armaments. Unless he could find those cultivators who were carrying the provisions and armaments, and steal their storage magical treasures. The pressure was not purposely unleashed at Wu Qi. Instead, it filled the entire hall at all times and in all directions. It was like a small sun. Without any deliberate effort, its light and heat would naturally radiate in all directions. When the Qin dynasty met with them, it had given Wu Qi a pleasant surprise. The defensive strength of the headquarters was comparable to the defense of the capital city of Great Yan Dynasty, and Wu Qi had no idea what to do next. If the headquarters was like this, what would the defense of the capital city of Qin Dynasty be like? Coldly looking at these black-robed men who had densely surrounded a barracks with various defensive runes, making it look like an impregnable fortress, Wu Qi sneered. Stealthily, he transformed into a green shadow and approached the campsite stealthily through the cover of countless grasses on the ground. A rich aroma of food was coming from the campsite in front of him. A large group of soldiers were lining up neatly and heading to the kitchen to get their meals. There was a special kitchen area in the campsite, as well as a large shed where soldiers could have their meals. The layout of the campsite was very reasonable, and it looked like a complete small city. While traveling underground, Wu Qi's body suddenly turned stiff, and he was struck dumb. He slapped his own head forcefully and scolded himself in his mind for being a pighead. Li Si was here, and Baichi was here as well. Both of them had the same status, so how could they appear in the same headquarters? It could only be him. Their immediate superior was here as well, and that was the reason why they would come here with the identity of an entourage. The organization of the Qin army was very strict. When it came to having meals, changing shifts, and even going to the toilet, they would form groups of 10 to 100 men. Everyone in the groups were familiar with each other, and no one would leave the group without permission. Once a stranger sneaked into the group, it would immediately attract everyone's attention. After observing the pattern of the Qin army for a while, Wu Qi had no choice but to give up the plan of disguising himself as a Qin soldier and sneaking into the campsite. Using the escape art of Earth, he took a stroll around the campsite. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.